schedules. Part 1 deals with the preliminary issues such as definition of terms as used in the bill, the scope of the bill, and the supremacy of the bill on matters relating to upstream petroleum operations, by providing that the bill, once passed into law, shall apply to all upstream operations being carried out in Kenya. Part 6 of the bill deals with the local content and training. Local content has been defined to mean the added value brought to the Kenyan economy, activities through systematic development, national capacity and capabilities, and investment in developing and procuring locally available workforce services, as well as supplies for the sharing of the accruing benefits. This part provides that a contractor and a subcontractor of the contractor conducting petroleum operations shall, among other things, give priority to services provided and goods manufactured, and ensure that priority is also given for the employment or engagement of qualified and skilled Kenyans at all levels of the value chain. This part also authorizes the Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority to monitor and enforce local content requirements in upstream petroleum operations. The part further provides for the training of Kenyans and the formulation of local content regulations in upstream petroleum operations. Those are some of the provisions in the bill which will be debated this afternoon. The Petroleum Exploration, Development and Production Bill. It is supposed to be debated for the second reading, and later on in the Committee of the Whole House, the members will be looking to consider some amendments to the Kenya Roads Bill, National Assembly Bill number 47 of 2017. The objective of this bill is to give effect to the 4th schedule of the Constitution in relation to roads subsector. If you are just joining us, you are looking at live pictures from the National Assembly chambers, and business is about to commence. As you can see on your screen, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Justin Muturi, is currently taking a bow and is walking on into the chambers. This broadcast is brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. There is a lot lined up before this house this afternoon, a broadcast which you can watch on Bungi.
In this republic, let your blessings descend upon us assembled, and grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests we have committed to our church. Amen. We obviously don't have quorum. May you ring the quorum bell.
As we wait for quorum to be achieved, we're looking at the order of business this afternoon. The business that the House will be engaging in, should they expedite the others. And the Public-Private Partnership Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 52 of 2017, is also appearing on the order paper this afternoon. And that particular bill should be debated for the second reading. The objective of this bill is to amend the Public-Private Partnerships Act of 2013 to recognize county governments as distinct contracting authorities for public-private partnership projects. To achieve this, the bill makes provisions for guidelines to be made by the Cabinet Secretary to facilitate the manner in which county governments may deal with public-private partnership arrangements. The bill affects the function of county governments as set out in the fourth schedule of the Constitution, and is therefore a bill concerning counties for purposes of the standing orders. It is a money bill within the meaning of Article 104, Production Bill, National Assembly Bill number 48 of 2017. After that, there will be the Committee of the Whole House, where the members will be considering some amendments to the Kenya Roads Bill, National Assembly Bill number 47 of 2017. And after that, the debate on the second reading of the Public-Private Partnership Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 52 of 2017. And finally, the Kenya Coast Guard Service Bill, National Assembly Bill number 45 of 2017, which should also be debated for the second reading. And among the statements pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 44, subsection 2C, the Speaker shall today allow the following member to make a statement to the chairpersons of the Budget and Appropriations and National Government Constituencies Development Fund committees. The statement to be raised by the Honorable Anthony Luach MP, member of Mathare constituency. The subject of that particular statement is the need for the Line Ministry to provide for the budget for establishment of information, communication and technology hubs in every constituency instead of placing it under the National Government Constituencies Development Fund. That particular statement will be requested by the Honorable Member Anthony Luach MP for Mathare constituency. The Kenya Coast Guard Service Bill of 2017 is divided into 7 parts, and part 1 of the bill deals with preliminary matters, including the object and guiding principles of the bill. The object of this bill is the establishment of the Kenya Coast Guard Service, while its guiding principles include the national values and principles of governance set out in Article 10, subsection 2 of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, as well as the values and principles of the public service set out in Article 232, and the principles of national security set out in Article 238. The service shall also strive for high standards of professionalism and discipline, promote and practice transparency, comply with constitutional standards of human rights and fundamental freedoms, reflect the diversity of Kenya, and insofar as it is practicable, ensure that not more than 2/3 of its members are of the same gender. Part 2 of the Kenya Coast Guard Service Bill provides for the establishment and functions of the service. Clause 5, quorum has been achieved.
That transacting business.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
Honour members, member for Kiambu or Kiambao. Is it? What are you doing now? You can't do that. You can't do that. Member for Laikipia. Honour member, I'm sure the member for Kiambu is senior enough. He should have told you that that's not what is done. Honour members, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 225, subsection 2, paragraph B, I wish to convey to the House that my office has received a petition concerning alleged unlawful and illegal transfer of teachers in Wajir County. The petition is signed by Messrs. Hassan Mahat, Abdi Hakim Shamake, Abdikadir Hassan, and Mahat Ali. Honourable members, the petitioners allege that the Teacher Service Commission and its leadership has failed to execute its duties as required by the Constitution, the Teacher Service Commission Act 2012, and the Children's Act 2001, by failing to protect the rights of children to education and by irregularly transferring non-local teachers from Wajir County. The petitioners further contend that as a result of the transfers, learning has been paralyzed in the county. The petitioners therefore pray that the National Assembly causes the Teacher Service Commission to review its policy regarding transfer of teachers to address the concerns of the irregular transfers and make any other order or direction that it deems fit in the circumstances of the prayers. Honourable members, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 227, this petition therefore stands committed to the Departmental Committee on Education and Research for consideration. The committee is requested to consider the petition and report its findings to the petitioners and to the House as required under Standing Order 227, subsection 2. Since these concerns of teachers' transfers have persisted for some time now, I direct the committee to inquire into the matter comprehensively with a view to resolving the concerns of the teachers, affected schools, and those of the Teacher Service Commission once and for all. I thank you. There is another petition by the member for Mwatate, Honorable Mwandime Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, the undersigned, on behalf of residents of Mwatate constituency, draw the attention of the House to the following. Subsection 1, that residents of the Mwatate constituency have experienced human and wildlife conflict for a long period of time. That in the recent past, wild animals have invaded into the human settlement and caused havoc to farmland, destroyed crops and homes, causing injuries and loss of life. That the residents of Mwatate constituency have suffered excessive crop loss and destruction, which has resulted in food insecurity and suffering, as most of the residents' livelihood depend on farming activities. That Section 25 of the Wildlife Conservation and Management Act 2013 provides for compensation for personal injury or death or damage to property caused by wildlife. That the numerous cases of wildlife-human conflicts victims have been reported to the relevant authorities for the purpose of compensation. In spite of this, the victims are yet to be compensated. That the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources has failed to compensate the victims, hence these victims are languishing in poverty and untold sufferings. That the matter presented in this petition is not pending before any constitutional or legal body. That efforts to have this matter resolved have been futile. Therefore, your humble petition pray that the National Assembly, through the Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resources, number 1, recommends prompt compensation of victims of human-wildlife conflict and such other affected persons and or families and property as a result of the conflict suffered due to the massive destruction of homes and crops and loss of life. 2, recommend that the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources puts in place mechanisms to ensure human and wildlife conflict.
To present this petition so that comments, observations, and clarifications on both petitions can then ensue. What I don't know is whether the members who are logged in in anticipation of these petitions, or because I can see Kibiot Meli. Did you want to comment on the petition? Very well. Although the petition has been referred, is going to be referred to your committee indeed.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I accept that the committee, the petition be referred to a committee, but I also want us to and ask your direction that this petition be looked at in a multifaceted way, in the sense that the issues at play are beyond the Education Committee. And I ask that maybe the Committee on National Security be also involved so that we can actually handle this thing expeditiously and we can be able to handle that particular matter in a better way. Thank you.
Just to observe, though, Honorable Meli, any committee, in fact, if you look at Article 125 of the Constitution, any committee of Parliament, or indeed Parliament itself, is at liberty to call, summon, invite any person to give information or evidence. It doesn't mean that the members of the Committee on National Security are more competent than yourselves. So even you yourselves are at liberty to invite and if need be, summon those that are responsible for matters to do with security to come and present their views before you. Honorable Meli.
Thank you. I think your guidance taken, Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Member for Seme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support the petition of the member, Honorable Mwadime, because, Mr. Speaker, the issue of wildlife is actually much more widespread than there. And I think we have even had petitions here before we put in place a new law. But the compensation is still slow. In many cases, it doesn't come. In my constituency of Seme, we have the menaces of hippopotamus and crocodiles. Crocodiles, of course, are killing people and animals, and the hippopotamus menace is such that people cannot plant crops, vegetables, maize along the lake. And this is something that has been raised many times. The organizations that are involved are aware, but many times, particularly when there are attacks by crocodiles, they seem to be protecting the animals more than the human being. So I think there should be a broader look into the issue of human-animal conflict. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Yatta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to support the earlier petition concerning the transfer of teachers from Wajir County, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, indeed, it's time that the relevant committee looked into this. It came as a shock to this House and to the nation that TSC did take the drastic action they did, and in one way gave to the demands of a terrorist organization. And Mr. Speaker, it confirmed there could be something terribly wrong within the way institutions operate, because, Mr. Speaker, on one side of the government, there's assurance of security, and yet TSC went ahead and gave the order to withdraw teachers. But of fundamental history, Mr. Speaker, of interest, is the consequences of withdrawal of teachers from Wajir. We are punishing kids, denying them their right to education. So, Mr. Speaker, this committee should move with the speed to ensure that these teachers actually go back and necessary security provided by government, Mr. Speaker. So we look forward, Mr. Speaker, to a report by that committee.
It's for that reason that I said that the Honorable Meli and his team are indeed at liberty to invite all the parties concerned, whether those dealing with the security sector as well as the education sector, indeed, if possible, to appear jointly so that the matter, you can look for ways of an amicable resolution of the problems that perhaps may be bedeviling the sector, the education sector, especially with regard to the teaching fraternity in that county and maybe others, not just Wajir County. Member for Igembe North.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I wish to support both petitions. and comment a little about the first one. Mr. Speaker, when you hear people are having a threat to life, it is not a matter which you can just brush aside. Those upcountry teachers have specifically been targeted by the attackers. And those of us who have been following the recent developments on security matters, the Al-Shabaab threat has generally subsided in the whole country. So, Mr. Speaker, when this committee is dealing with this story, they need to peel the layers that are covering up what might be happening in the Northeastern. Mr. Speaker, you might be forcing these people there. But we need them on that place, in that place. And I wanted to request the committee, when they are doing their investigations, the biggest picture they need to look at is next year's census. Those of us who know what happened in those places like Mandera and Wajir, the elders na vijana wanachukua makaratasi wanaenda wanajaza vitu zao huko.
Now, which language, which one?
So, Mr. Speaker, we need the government also to investigate whether that one is tied to the insecurity on upcountry teachers. Yeah.
Member for Kitui Central.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to comment on this petition on the teachers. Mr. Speaker, I think this matter is quite a serious matter. And even as we talk about making sure that our children go to school and they are taught, Mr. Speaker, you must realize that the issue of actual security is more important than even the other thing. Because if you are a teacher and you are posted there and you die, then at the end of the day, it's a choice between death and working. And I think, Mr. Speaker, we all agree, honorable members, if any of us is given a choice between choosing to die and to work, obviously we will choose life. And on the basis of that, I think, Mr. Speaker, what I would recommend, Mr. Speaker, I think this idea of having a joint session of the two committees, security and education, Mr. Speaker, might be somehow the way out. Because this matter requires a kind of approach. Because, Mr. Speaker, about 3 weeks ago, I'm sure members are aware that some teachers were camping at the TSC. And actually, some of us used to get more than 100 SMSs after every 1 hour, requesting honorable members to intervene because they are suffering and it looks like their employer is not really concerning their flight, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I would really appeal that even as the matter has been discussed by honorable members, that we also must look at the issue of teachers who have, their lives have been threatened, and there's a matter of choosing between life and death. On the petition on the wildlife, Mr. Speaker, we all know this house is a house of records. And Mr. Speaker, I was lucky to serve in the 11th Parliament with Mr. Mwandime, Honorable Mwandime. And I'm sure the same petition actually was brought into this house by the same honorable member. And Mr. Speaker, I think the issue is, as a house, we need to really discuss the issue of implementation of some of these recommendations we make as a house. Because I'm sure if the recommendation had been implemented, Mr. Speaker, then Honorable Mwandime will not be raising this petition today. Because the farmers are suffering. So, Mr. Speaker, I would urge the Chair of the Implementation Committee, my friend, Honorable Olekenda, Mr. Speaker, needs really to start working and push hard so that the House's recommendations are actually implemented, Mr. Speaker. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support the petition.
Honorable Mwandime, your prayers are that which committee looks into the petition? Did you say Environment and Natural Resources?
Environment and
No,
it's a
Mwandime.
Committee on Environment and Wildlife.
But
Is it
essentially,
no, it's wildlife. It's already separated. I think
but
it's
strictly
already,
speaking, the law, and I just want to pick up from where Dr. Anyikal left. This House in the 11th Parliament passed the the relevant law, which provides for methods and modes of compensation in the manner that the petitioners have complained. Shouldn't we be looking at implementation of that law? Because it looks like there could be some challenge. It is not that I know anything, but you as parliamentarians have the power to allocate sufficient resources to the agencies that are supposed to do the compensations. So that perhaps I would request that Honorable Mwadime, yourself, you appear before that committee also, so that you understand and invite the relevant the executive branch to come and explain why it is that there are so many cases of human beings, livestock that have been killed or maimed by wildlife, and there has not been any compensation. So I think, Honorable Mwadime, it's important so that we can see from act within the usual time frame of 60 days and report.
I stand guided, Mr. Speaker, though I tried this several times during the session, session 11th Parliament, but unfortunately the issue was unresolved. Maybe you direct both the budget co-chair and the environment committee so that they can budget the compensation amount which can be given, because so far, since the act was initiated, no one in this country has been compensated. And you see, we're going to see the sum in my...
Well, my assumption is that the chair of that committee is in the House. I may not quite remember who it is, because chairs have taken to the Honorable Kareke Mbiuki. We had marked the front benches for chairs, and in the absence, the deputies, so that we know who takes their work seriously. Now, when I see some of them empty, it suggests that some may have decided to abscond. But nevertheless, the petition stands committed there. Just start counting the days.
Oh, thank you,
Today is the 12th of April, 60 days from today.
Oh,
if no report has come, you will be at liberty to raise the matter so that the House can address itself to whatever the shortcomings may be.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the petition which I presented, I think Honorable Makali Mulu, the issue about security, in my view, it's not necessarily, does not necessarily raised in this matter of teachers, does not necessarily have to be addressed by the Committee on National Security sitting jointly with education, because the people who are going to give the information relating to security and or insecurity are in the executive branch, not the members of that committee. So once whatever the challenges, whatever the problems are, once they are given to the Committee on Education and Research, they still be brought to this House for the House to debate and resolve one way or other. So I think, Honorable Mele, I think you can take up that matter so that you can give us an all-round view of what the situation is like, as given both from the security sector and from the education sector. I mean, the long and short is, I think we would want to have the matter resolved one way or other. Honourable members, allow me, before we proceed to the next order, to recognize the presence in the Speaker's Gallery of pupils from Potter's House Academy, Keses constituency, Uasin-Gishu County. They are welcome to observe the proceedings. Next order.
Order number 5, papers.
The Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honourable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Thursday, April 12, 2018. Report of the Departmental Committee on Energy on consideration of the Petroleum Exploration, Development and Production Bill 2017. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Chairperson, Justice and Legal Affairs Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, April 12, 2018. Report on the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs on the vetting of the nominee for the appointment as member of the Judicial Service Commission. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Leader of the delegation to the inaugural Commonwealth Parliamentarians Forum, the Honorable Amos Kimunya.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following report on the table of the House today, Thursday, 12th of April 2018. The report of the Kenya delegation to the inaugural Commonwealth Parliamentarians Forum held at the Westminster, London, United Kingdom on the 26th of February to the 1st of March 2018.
Very well. Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following motion. That this House adopts the report of the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs on the vetting of the nominee for appointment as member of the Judicial Service Commission, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, April 12, 2018, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 171, Sub-Article 2C, and Article 250, Sub-Article 2B of the Constitution, approves the appointment of the appointment of Honorable Justice Mohammed Abdullahi Wasame as member of the Judicial Service Commission. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable George Kariuki, member for Ndia constituency.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to give notice of motion on the following. That aware that the fourth schedule of the Constitution provides for the protection of environment and natural resources, and in particular water protection, securing sufficient residual water among others by the national government. Further aware that the abundant water during rainy seasons goes to waste, deeply concerned over the destructive nature of the said excess water on roads, buildings, and other infrastructure, and which many a times has resulted in loss of lives and properties in the cities. Cognizant of the fact that during dry periods, there is always rationing of water due to low water levels in the reservoirs that serve cities and towns. This House urges the government to consider creating rainwater collection and storage management systems in the cities and major towns in Kenya. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. Next order.
Order number 7, statements.
Leader of the Majority Party. Leader of the Majority Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 44, subsection 2A, I rise to give the following statement on behalf of the House Business Committee. The committee met this week at the rise of the House to give priority to the business that will be considered today and part of next week. Honorable Speaker, on Tuesday next week, the following bills will be considered in the Committee of the Whole House. The Kenya Roads Bill 2017, should we not conclude it today? And Mr. Speaker, on that matter, we have agreed, Honorable TJ Kajwang has a number of amendments, and we have agreed with the chair that he appears before the committee on Monday. They harmonize all those amendments together, and then we can put the bill on Tuesday at the Committee of the Whole House. And then we also consider, Mr. Speaker, if time allows us on Tuesday, the Energy Bill 2017 at the Committee of the Whole House. Honorable Speaker, the House is also scheduled to consider the following bills for second reading. The Petroleum Exploration, Development and Production Bill 2017, should we not conclude it today? 2, the Public-Private Partnership Amendment Bill 2017, and the Kenya Coast Guard's Service Bill 2017. I urge the chairpersons of the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security to expedite the consideration of the Kenya Coast Guard's Service Bill 2017 and table the report so as to guide the debate during the second reading of the bill next week. Honorable Speaker, on questions before committee, the following cabinet secretaries are scheduled to appear before committee on Tuesday, 17th April 2018. And Mr. Speaker, I want to confirm and go unanswered that these ministers have confirmed that they will be available on Tuesday. The first one is...
One second, Leader. I think, honorable members, this particular aspect of what the Leader of Majority is now about to state is so important so that members should know that if you have filed questions and on the appointed day you do not appear, the question will be dropped and may not be raised again for another 6 months. So it is important members know that if you know you have filed questions, this particular aspect of what the Leader of Majority is about to announce is important so that you make sure that you are present at the appointed time and place. So to avoid a situation whereby members will go to harass the clerks that I went to discuss about some cattle dip in my place with some other villager somewhere in town. That's why I was not able to come. No, if you don't appear, the question will be dropped, and the chairs of committees are accordingly informed. If the member who has asked the question does not appear or is not present and has not given prior notice and the notice has been approved, the question should be dropped. Because everybody must really must show seriousness. Proceed, Leader of Majority.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That was the problem the chairs were facing. Members were not coming. But now it's been made very, very clear. The first cabinet secretary will be the cabinet secretary for Interior and Coordination of National Government before the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security to answer questions from the following members: Honorable William Kamket, MP; Honorable Muturi Kigano, MP; Honorable Kalip Kositani, MP; Honorable Gideon Muliungi, MP; Honorable Aramat Lamarken, MP, in the main chamber, County Hall, at 10 a.m. Speaker, I'm sure 80% of these members are not here.
None of them appears to
Yes.
be present.
So, second cabinet secretary, Mr. Speaker, is the cabinet secretary for lands and physical planning before the Departmental Committee on Lands to answer questions from the following: Honorable Olago Oluoch, MP, in the mini chamber, County Hall, at 11 a.m. Speaker, even chairs must be here. Because even I'm not seeing the chair of lands, I'm not seeing the chair of national security. So as much as the members should be here, the chairs also should also be here. And with the designated places of sitting. The third and the last is the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture and Irrigation before the Committee on Agriculture and Livestock to answer questions from the Honorable Joshua Kutuni, MP, the Honorable Liza Chelule, MP, the Honorable Elisha Odhiambo, MP, in the mini chamber at 11:30 a.m. Honorable Speaker, the House Business Committee will reconvene on Tuesday, April 17th, 2018, at the rise of the House to consider business for the coming week. Mr. Speaker, I also want to ask members, those who want to file amendments to the Roads Bill, to the Energy Bill, to the Cybercrime Bill 2017, also to make sure that they file their amendments within the time provided for in the standing orders, so that you don't rush and bring amendments on the floor of the House, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Makali Mulu.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, yesterday morning, the leader of majority tabled the supplementary budget estimates. And Mr. Speaker, normally after tabling such a report, members normally get copies so that they are able to read through. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, you also directed the departmental committees to use about 7 days to finalize on that important document. But up to now, Mr. Speaker, honorable members have not been able to access copies of that budget, supplementary budget. So, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to request for your direction in terms of how do we proceed in a situation where we don't have even copies of the document, and we have already ordered that committees have 7 days to conclude on deliberating on that document. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That's an important issue, point that you raised, Honorable Makali Mulu, because traditionally and the requirement of the law is Treasury or any other government ministry purporting to have documents tabled here must know that the House has 349 members and must therefore bring not less than 349 copies of documents. Every member is entitled to a copy. It is not the responsibility of Parliament to begin photocopying documents. That it is the responsibility of the executive, if they want or if they desire that this House should consider those proposals. And therefore, I direct that the National Treasury, the Clerk of the National Assembly, writes to the National Treasury, the Cabinet Secretary and the Principal Secretary, requiring them to submit to the House, because I'm informed that they brought only one copy. That is playing games with the Parliament. We cannot do that. The Clerk is directed to write to the Cabinet Secretary to submit not later than end of the day tomorrow. Not later than end of the day tomorrow, Friday, 13th of April, sufficient copies of the various documents in support of the supplementary estimates 2 for the financial year 2017-2018. And the period for consideration by the committees will be accordingly adjusted, because the committees cannot just go to sit and look at nothing. And indeed, the executive as a whole want never to play those kind of games. We are not going to, we cannot provide one copy, surely, to a House which has got 349 members, even if it was their desire that the Speaker should not have a copy. Because ideally, then they should provide us with not less than 350. So it's a valid point, Honorable Makali Mulu, and the period for consideration will be accordingly adjusted. But I need to ascertain that by the close of business tomorrow, there will be available not less than 349 copies of the various documents. Leader of Majority. Indeed, I think, Leader Majority, you can take up this matter.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you for that direction, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think that should extend to anybody who's bringing documents for tabling, including even the Auditor General, constitutional office holders, because, Mr. Speaker, when a document is tabled by the Leader of Majority or by anybody, even it becomes a public document. The media is always in my office looking for documents. And sometimes I'm forced to share my own copy. You know? So I think, Mr. Speaker, this should go to anybody, any institution which is under obligation to bring documents to Parliament, that they must go and bring sufficient. In fact, over 349, they should bring excess, because staff go to table office to pick these documents. Honorable Makali Mulu, you know, is an expert in this matter. So he's an interested party. But even the reports that we table here, now a report has been tabled of the Petroleum Bill. How many of us members go pick a copy and read that? Mr. Speaker, we have a very vibrant research department in this house. How many of us members know that department exists? And that department has been established to assist members, you know, to do a research on various issues and bills and motions that they want to. So, Mr. Speaker, even on our part, there's some liturgy that, you know, and when the people realize that we are not coming for these documents, then those outside feel, furthermore, nobody is reading, Mr. Speaker. So I think I totally agree with Honorable Makali Mula and the direction you have given, but I think we need to have anybody bringing documents for tabling, there's necessary volumes and numbers are required, Mr. Speaker, but also even us, we must have the culture to read and debate constructively on these matters.
On the same issue, Honorable Nyikal.
Be answered by ministers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The issue of ministers answering questions that is now to some extent confined to the committee, Mr. Speaker, I think it has kind of demeaned a little bit the importance of that session. Mr. Speaker, you remember in the last parliament, this was a very important issue. We even thought of ways of bringing the ministers into the House to actually answer questions. Because although questions are put by individual members, many times they have far-reaching effects of national level, and many members would really like to participate. And before that, when we had the parliamentary system, ministers used to answer on the floor. I've been involved in preparing answers for them, and ministers were very keen that very serious consideration is made, serious preparations are made, but this thing is increasingly starting to look like a committee affair. And so you just find members of the committee, not even many, actually participating in this and even asking supplementary questions. I think, Mr. Speaker, that I noticed, I think early in the last parliament, that there was notices in the television sets all over parliament pressings which were indicating what time the ministers will be answering or events will be taking place in various committees. I think in this particular case of ministers in answering questions, I think this should be made public, because if members don't come to this session on Thursday, there will be no way of knowing what minister will be answering questions. And if they don't look on, say, on the morning, the Monday order paper, again, they will not know. So my suggestion is that we should make this more public, use the screens in the precincts of Parliament to know what time which minister is asking what question. I think this will bring back the significance of this session. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well said, but Honorable Nyikal, this is work in progress. That's why we have this particular session dedicated the county hall to be the only venue for that that particular exercise of question and answer to cabinet secretaries. And like in the past, when committees, every committee would be in some room somewhere, and even the cabinet secretaries themselves used to have difficulties finding where the particular committee is sitting. We have deliberately decided that on Tuesday mornings, questions will be answered or responded to by cabinet secretaries at the county hall chamber, so that everybody, the media and everybody, know that that's where the various cabinet secretaries, as stated by the leader majority, will be appearing at the respective times. And the members themselves must also note that they are required to be present. In any event, the procedure of question is the member raises his question, not necessarily reading the question afresh. The cabinet secretary responds. That same member is given the first opportunity to ask the first supplementary question, and then whoever is on the chair is supposed to know that, to check the number of questions that the particular cabinet secretary is going to respond to within the 1 hour allocated, then know how many other members raising supplementary questions will be allowed to do so. So that at least that particular time between 9:30, is it 9:30 or 10? I don't know, is it leader majority? They start at 10. So from 10, 1 hour is this cabinet secretary, the chair of this committee. The next 1 hour, it is this cabinet secretary. The next is the other one. So that everybody now knows that they will be required. We will be providing them maybe some small room where they can sit and maybe have what parliamentarians taste when it is around tea time. We are generous also in some respect. So they will be relaxing there, waiting for their turns to go in to be asked questions and to respond. But like I've said, it is work in progress. As we move on, we will see how we can improve it. There are suggestions on ways of trying to improve it further, but we want to start now with dedicating that particular chamber only on Tuesday mornings, so that even all members, in fact, there's no reason why, if you had a question, remember one member is raising a question on cattle rustling, for instance. If you come from a cattle rustling prone area, even if you're not the one who asked the question, you should be there, you should be interested. You could get a chance to also throw some supplementary question. So members should take interest in what the leader of majority was saying, finding out what questions are coming, and more importantly, by attending the afternoon session of Thursdays. And then, as you rightly pointed out, administratively, the staff, the clerk, is also instructed to ensure that the various questions are put on the screens around the parliament precincts on the morning of Tuesdays. Member for Chair of Energy, you have an intervention.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you for the direction that you've given. Yesterday, when you gave the direction that the committees have 7 days, I took it upon myself to go to the table room to pick a copy, and we rescheduled a meeting this morning on matters to ask our physical analysts attached to our committee to be able to come and give us some highlights on the same. Unfortunately, today, again, we shelved some very important matters in the committee. But again, when we went there in the morning, yesterday, I was told to come back after 1 hour, where we didn't get. But I think the direction that you've given is quite, and more so the extension that you have given to committees, that yesterday, by virtue of, it was not the mistake of the committees. And we totally agree that it's important in future that any person who is required to place those copies are there ready for people who can be able to. But I also agree with Majority Leader that also the culture of reading in this parliament needs to be encouraged. Sometimes it's important for members to have a look at what you have. Some of the members, whenever they are raising or contributing without looking at the report. That report does answer most of the questions that the member is talking about, and maybe he's asking questions which are already in that kind of a report. So I totally agree with the directive that you have given. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, honourable members, within the order number 7, I have approved that the Honourable Anthony Oluoch, a member for Mathare constituency, will seek a statement understanding order number 44, subsection 2, paragraph C. And it is important that I draw the attention of the chairpersons of various committees to the provisions of that paragraph C, that when a statement is sought after having been approved by the Speaker may direct that the chairperson responds on the spot on the same day, or the Speaker can direct that the response be given on any other appointed day. So it is important that members be looking at what is coming, so that, and particularly the chairpersons, because you may find yourself being directed to respond on the spot. Honorable Anthony Oluoch. And I'm saying this because I don't seem to see the chairperson of the Budget and Appropriations Committee and the vice chair. I don't know who is the vice chair. Moses Lesonet. Both are absent. Oh, the Honorable Lesonet is, he has changed the position so many times. And not being a very tall member, where he is now sitting, he tends to get lost. Honorable Lesonet, very well, we've seen you are around. The member for Mathare is going to seek a statement.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. This is a statement on the requirement to establish information communication technology ICT hubs in each constituency through the National Government Constituency Development Fund. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order number 442C, I wish to request for a statement from the chairperson of Budget and Appropriations Committee and the National Government Constituency Development Fund regarding two things. Number one, Mr. Speaker, the requirement to establish information communication technology ICT hubs in each constituency through the National Government Constituency Development Funds, and two, funds reduced from the NGCDF through the 2017-2018 supplementary budget. Mr. Speaker, the genesis of these were directives that were issued, and I think agreements between the NCDF board and the CDF committee of this committee, with the requirement that each constituency sets apart 4.2 million shillings for the establishment of 4 ICT hubs. Mr. Speaker, though the above directives and requirements is noble, because in my view they would spur development and also create job opportunities for the youth, they have the effect of reducing the limited monies that are allocated to CDF in each constituency and taking away the same resources from the core functions. Mr. Speaker, further, through the 2017 and 2018 supplementary budget, this House did reduce the constituency fund allocation to each constituency by at least 15 million, for leaving about 85 million to cover both the ongoing and new projects, including the administrative issues and other contingencies. Mr. Speaker, in this statement that I propose to this committee, I would wish that they answer or respond to the following issues. One, though the executive or ministerial directive establishing innovation hubs is a noble idea, is it within the provisions of the NGCDF Act, regulations, as well as the Constitution? Secondly, considering the limited funds available to NGCDF, would the ministry consider having these hubs established and the infrastructure maintained through the aligned ministry budgets? Number three, considering the Kenyan shillings 15 million reduced from each of the constituencies during the 2017-2018 supplementary budget, would the Budget Appropriations Committee consider allocating a corresponding amount of 15 million that was taken away through the supplementary budget in 2017? And lastly, Mr. Speaker, I am aware that there are a number of constituencies still struggling to get CDF funds. Would the CDF committee enlighten the House as to when the constituencies whose funds have not been reduced will be able to get their allocation? Mr. Speaker, I beg to request. Thank you.
Well, the latter bit of your statement should go to the chair of CDF committee, Honorable Mauka Maure.
Mr. Speaker, I do see the urgency of this question and agree that we do a response on Thursday next week.
Very well. There was an issue, there was an aspect which relates to the Budget and Appropriations Committee. Honorable Sonet.
Mr. Speaker, we will be able to respond, Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday 23rd, Mr. Speaker, Tuesday 23rd. Noting also, Mr. Speaker, that we are already working on that issue, especially the 15 million is talking about. So we'll be more than ready, Mr. Speaker, to respond and accordingly as we write the current supplementary budget. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, I think both chairs have actually made reasonable requests, Honorable Oluoch. So the Honorable Mauka Maure will give you a response to the portion of your statement or request that touches on the NGCDF, while the Budget and Appropriations Committee, that is on Thursday next week. Thursday next week. Which date is this? The 19th? 20? 19th, yes, it's 19th. Yes, what's clarification? Just a minute.
Mr. Speaker, we need a clarification that the portion on ICT and the Ministry of Information and what they are about to do to CDF and the imposition implied, it to be responded by the Treasury kind of line committee.
So order. Who is this one now? Member for Kiambu, how can you are shouting to the sergeant at times as if you are in Kiambu town? We can't follow proceedings. What is thing? Oh, what do you mean? This is the way you speak in Kiambu town. This is the house. No, you can't do that. That's next time you'll face the consequences of being out of order. Hello, Maure.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to request the part that goes, that's talking about the 4.2 million. It was decided and imposed on the CDFs by the ICT ministries to do the hubs, while the money has not, because we should have a provision, even the Treasury, to give guidelines on how to go about this story. Was there any tendering? Was there any due diligence? Was there any, or the details involved? So, Mr. Speaker, we would ask the Finance Committee, I think, to come and try and take up that bit of it rather than the CDF.
Which aspect? Are you saying that something was imposed by a...
It means, yes, Mr. Speaker, it means policy, kind of exposition.
But can a ministry come to impose directives on...
They did. What happened, Mr. Speaker, they decided that we need ICT hubs in every constituency. And the budget, and by the budget fixed at 4.2 million. And the company to do it has already been appointed. So members are being asked to go and put the hubs and they provide the places That's how complicated it is. Yeah.
Leader majority, maybe you could clarify.
Speaker, Honorable Watch has asked three fundamental issues, very dear to these members. And I think as chairs, you represent us and Parliament. You don't represent the executive. I think the Budget and Appropriation Committee, the ICT Committee, and the National Government CDF Committee can have one session. And the Speaker, the law is very clear. It is the Constituency Committee that will provide the list of projects. It is nowhere written the Minister for ICT will provide. And the Speaker, myself, the Leader of Majority, but you want to find out what was happening this afternoon, you just need to go to the Hansard department and tell them to give you the Hansard copy and see who has spoken, what the Speaker said, if there was a communication. So, Mr. Speaker, I think these matters raised by Honorable Oluoch are very pertinent to members, and I think the Chair of Budget already is aware. I have told him the Chair of Finance is aware, and Honorable Moke is aware, and I am ready even to assist. Let us sit together. By Thursday next week, we bring an answer to the House. And then the approval of the Supplementary Estimate 2 and the Appropriation Bill, Supplementary Appropriation Bill 2 becomes very easy matter to deal with, as we also deal with the other matters in the supplementary. But I think the matters raised are very weighty, and I think the chairs should take it seriously, Mr. Speaker. It's in the interest of all of us and our people.
Seems like the ball is in Honorable Lesonet's court. Honorable Lesonet.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I want to appreciate that those are extremely very weighty issues. And Mr. Speaker, as I speak, I have the privilege of having chaired CDF in the last parliament, where this issue of information hubs was discussed in the last parliament. And it is not true, Mr. Speaker, that the ministry imposed that 4.2 million shillings per constituency on the CDF. It was actually that decision, Mr. Speaker, was a product of Akamugunji, which was in this house. And Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker,
honor members, let the honorable
let me just finish. Let me just finish, Mr. Speaker.
Honor members.
Yes,
you
Mr.
see,
Speaker.
when you say he is lying, just a minute.
Mr. Speaker.
No, honorable Resonet, just 1 minute, please. For avoidance of doubt, you cannot challenge my memory. I am the one who chaired that Kamukunji here, and the cabinet secretary for ICT came here, but he just made a pitch. Those were just suggestions. So it was suggestions. It is true that there was a Kamukunji. So to that extent, the Honorable Sonet is right.
Yes.
But the Kamukunji, like I told you yesterday, is an informal gathering.
Yeah.
It's an informal gathering of members. It is not. It does not produce anything binding to anybody. Yeah. It can't even bind a mosquito. So, yeah. So it was yes, it was that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, Mr. Speaker, what I was just saying, Mr. Speaker, is this is now the 12th Parliament. And, Mr. Speaker, the members, or a good number of members in the 11th Parliament, really liked that idea of information hubs until in that 11th Parliament, we were able to install in about 6 constituencies, Mr. Speaker. Among them is the Limuru constituency, where we have an information hub up and running. That is to say, Mr. Speaker, this is not cast on stone. And Honorable Maoka Maore and Honorable Dwale, they are right to say that it remains the decision of each constituency to see whether they want to proceed with that information hub or not. And Mr. Speaker, in Eldama Ravine, the constituency I represent, I am only moving to the extent of 2 sites where there's no optic fiber. The optic fiber is fairly a long distance. So I'm comfortable with financing with $1 million shillings per site for 2 sites. The other 2 or even 4 or 5 sites in Eldama Ravine, they're able to make their own applications to the providers, to Safaricom, and to all other providers at a much lower rate, Mr. Speaker, of even less than 40,000 shillings, and you have a site up and running where the optic fiber is already available. So, Mr. Speaker, I totally agree with the sentiments of members that on Thursday next week, we shall be able to give a new direction, and also Honorable Mauka Maure, the chair of CDF, and myself, I'm still a member there, we'll be able to make a decision, Mr. Speaker, so that we can release members to decide on that 4.2 million shillings, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the other issue of, in the first supplementary, yes, it is true that CDF was reduced by 4.5 billion shillings. And Mr. Speaker, budget is made by this House. This House approved the first supplementary budget to reduce CDF by 4.5 billion shillings, reducing each constituency from 101 million to that 85 or 86 million shillings, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, as budget committee, we shall be waiting for submissions from departmental committees, which those submissions, they will be submitting to us on the 25th of this month of April. And even those submissions, Mr. Speaker, they will have justified the need to increase CDF back the 4.5 million shillings. We shall not have any problem as budget committee. So, Mr. Speaker, in a nutshell, we shall be waiting for submissions from departmental committees on the 25th, of this month, so that we can bring a report to this House, Mr. Speaker, on the 26th. So with those remarks, Mr. Speaker.
So I wanted us to close this, Honorable Makali Mulu, but it's about budget also.
Just very quickly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, while I agree with my colleagues in terms of those issues raised by Honorable Luoch, there is one matter, Mr. Speaker, which I think is important, and I don't know, that is outside this House in terms of who is supposed to help us. The reason why people are not getting money, Mr. Speaker, is because of the exchequer release. And I think, unless that is addressed, Mr. Speaker, the issue of when to release money to constituencies will remain pending. And I think we really need to get a way of how assisting, or somebody assisting us through Treasury, so that money is released to, unless the board has money, they can't release to the constituencies. And Mr. Speaker, I believe strongly, because this time of political, you remember, since August to about February, we are not getting any money as members of parliament. I think we need to be given priority now that we are able to operate, so that we can get money and work in our constituencies. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Again, the power is in your hands to compel the Treasury to release exchequer. So, you might be crying when actually you have the answers to the problems that may be bedeviling operations at the constituency level with regard to CDF-funded, NCDF-funded projects. So please, again, exercise your authority. Exercise your authority. You have what it takes. And you have it. You have it. I don't need to really expound on this, because it is there. You have it in the Constitution. You have it here in the PFM Act. You have it in your standing orders. So the NCDF, NGCDF Act. So it is actually you. You may be, when you say you reduce, then sometimes one may think that, may look at it as if you are saying you decided to voluntarily, knowingly shoot yourselves in the feet. That's what it may amount to, because it is this House that passes the budget and those supplementaries. So if there was a reduction, it was done through this House. And fortunately, like I always remind people, you look at Article 122, the Speaker has no vote. So really, it is, this ball is squarely in your court, honorable members. So address it as you find appropriate in the circumstances. Honorable Watch, the response on Thursday next week, 19th. Very well, next order.
Order number 8, the Energy Bill, National Assembly Bill number 50 of 2017, second reading. Question to be put.
Honourable members, debate on this bill was concluded yesterday, and what remains is for the question to be put. And having ascertained that the House has the requisite quorum, I proceed to put the question that the Energy Bill, National Assembly Bill number 50 of 2017, be now read a second time. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as of the contrary opinion say no? The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to consolidate the laws relating to energy, to provide for national and county government functions in relation to energy, to provide for the establishment, powers, and functions of the energy sector entities, promotion of renewable energy, exploration, recovery, and commercial utilization of geothermal energy, regulation of midstream and downstream petroleum and coal activities, regulation, production, supply, and use of electricity and other energy forms, and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 9, the Petroleum Exploration and Production Bill, National Assembly Bill number 48 of 2017, second reading.
Leader of the Majority Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Petroleum Exploration, Development and Production Bill 2017, National Assembly Bill number 40 of 2017 be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, the Petroleum Bill 2017 is a constitutional bill that was required to have been passed by the 11th Parliament. And this bill, Mr. Speaker, has had a 5-year constitutional timeline as provided for in the 5th schedule to the Constitution to implement the provisions of the Constitution relating to the use of natural resources. But Mr. Speaker, before this bill was introduced first in the House in August 2015, when it was read the first time, we concluded it, the Senate was passed to the Senate, and the Senate concluded it, was forwarded to the President for assent, which he referred it back to the National Assembly with a reservation on a few clauses in the bill in accordance with the provisions and powers given to the President under the Article 115 of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, the National Assembly considered the President's reservation and passed this bill on the 23rd of November 2016, and it was thereafter forwarded to the Senate for consideration or for concurrence. The bill, however, Mr. Speaker, lapsed in the Senate following the end of the 11th Parliament. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill, therefore, is being introduced in the House to ensure the implementation of the Constitution as required in the 5th schedule or to the Constitution. And, Mr. Speaker, as it is now, this bill carries all the amendments of the 11th Parliament, both houses, plus the reservation of the President in line with Article 115 of the Constitution. So, and on the onset, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Chair, Honorable Gikaria, his Vice Chair, Honorable Pukose, and the entire membership for making sure that they have complied with the provision of the standing orders and have tabled their report this afternoon, for which members will use to debate and understand the views of the stakeholders, which are captured in that report. Mr. Speaker, this bill has a total of 120 clauses and is divided into 11 parts. The bill, Mr. Speaker, objectively seeks to provide a framework for contracting, for exploration, and for the development of petroleum, together with the production of petroleum discovered within the licensed petroleum exploration blocks. Speaker, our country is now geared to make sure that we use, for the benefit of our people, the various natural resources found within our borders. And that's why His Excellency the President had the wisdom to form a separate Ministry of Mining and Petroleum under the able leadership of former colleague, former minister in the 10th Parliament and Senator of Turkana, and the current as the minister for the new ministry. Speaker, this bill proposes to repeal the Petroleum Exploration and Production Act, Chapter 308 of the laws of Kenya. So you'll find transitional clauses in this bill. The moment this bill is ascended to law, that section, that chapter 308 of the laws of Kenya dealing with the Petroleum Exploration and Production Act will become redundant. Speaker, now let me go through the 11 parts. Part 1 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, for those members who have this bill, Part 1 of the bill deals with the preliminary issues, such as definition of terms as used in the bill, the scope of the bill, and the supremacy of the bill on matters relating to upstream petroleum operations. Speaker, this bill will use interchangeably 3 keywords: upstream, midstream, and downstream in discussing petroleum matters. So this bill will deal with the supremacy of the bill on matters relating to upstream petroleum operations by providing, and that's what the bill provides, that the bill, once passed into law, shall apply to all upstream operations being carried out in Kenya. Upstream in the sense that it talks about the exploration and the production of crude oil or gas is what is referred to in this upstream. Part 2 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, deals with the national upstream petroleum policy and plan. This is how do we deal with the blocks, how do we deal with the exploration of crude oil and gas. And this part, Mr. Speaker, provides that the Cabinet Secretary shall develop and publish and review the upstream strategic plan, that the various investors who will be involved in the exploration of petroleum or products will be known to the public, and the House will have certain powers in making sure that the interest of the community, the interest of that county, and the interest of the national government in terms of royalty, in terms of sources, is taken care of. Part 2 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, deals with that. So the Cabinet Secretary shall publish and review a strategic plan that will deal with upstream. Part 3 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, deals with petroleum institutions. The part deals with the powers and functions of the Cabinet Secretary responsible for matters relating to petroleum. The National Upstream Petroleum Advisory Committee will be formed under that part 3. And the function of that advisory committee, Mr. Speaker, is generally to advise the Cabinet Secretary on upstream petroleum operations and production. So the minister will be advised by that advisory committee. Then under part 3, Mr. Speaker, there is the Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, which function shall be to regulate, to monitor, to supervise upstream petroleum operations in Kenya. So we will have an authority that will deal with how to regulate, how to monitor, and how to supervise upstream petroleum operations. Part 4 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, deals with upstream petroleum rights and the management of petroleum resources. The rights of the various stakeholders is dealt with in part 4 of the bill. This part, Mr. Speaker, vests all petroleum existing in its natural conditions on the national government, in trust for the people of Kenya. Speaker, we need to be very, very clear. Having 47 county governments does not mean that we forfeit our rights to the one nation called Kenya. These are 47 homesteads in one big homestead called Kenya. So if you have gas and another county has coal, so Speaker, we all belong to one country. So that trust is with the national government. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, there will be wars worse than the Biafra wars of Nigeria of the 60s. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, the resource sharing formula should not excite members. Because in 2010 Constitution, Mr. Speaker, we came out in large number and voted for the Constitution because of devolution. And today, some parts of this country receives more than 10 billion annually. And I'll give an example, Mr. Speaker. Garissa County receives 8 billion. Wajir County receives 10 billion. Mandera County receives 11 billion. Combined, 3 counties in the north receive over 30 billion. But if you go there, they will still tell you we are marginalized. We are marginalized. Marginalized what? You have been given resources for water, for everything. So, Mr. Speaker, those of us who voted in the 10th Parliament for devolution, what has happened is devolution has been, corruption has devolved. We don't see our people as in fact, CDF is the only one that you can see as you walk. So, Mr. Speaker, do not look at this bill from your county position, from your village. Yeah, we can give you a 10-15% resource allocation until you'll find that what the community receives is higher than what is allocated to that county. How will you manage? How will the community manage 10-15 billion annually from that resource? So, Mr. Speaker, let us look in the lens of a Kenyan. So that's why in part 4, the trust, that part, petroleum existing in its natural condition is vested on the national government in trust, to hold in trust for the people of Kenya. The people of Kisumu are the same as the people of Garissa and the people of Machakos. So let us not divide our people just because you found some little gas, just because there are some little gold mines in Homa Bay, and then you feel you want to have your own chiefdom there in that corner. So, Mr. Speaker, I want us to look at this bill with very sober minds. Because we took money to counties, and today we are more poorer than, I am sure, Mr. Speaker, I will not be very popular with governors when they see me. But, Mr. Speaker, and I don't want to become a governor, but we need to tell the truth. Part 5 of the bill deals with information and reporting. This part, Mr. Speaker, provides for the reporting requirements of the contractor and information that may be required by the Cabinet Secretary. Speaker, people are given blocks. They don't report back. They have a license for 10, 15 years. So, Mr. Speaker, we must be very, very, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Kamket, you know, is a bit excited. Because with some other leaders, they went and paid a visit to Mzee Moi. Congratulations. Congratulations. But that should not excite you. We visit former presidents. Yeah, you took the handshake a bit further, so which is good. Mr. Speaker, the handshake is moving. It has left Harambee House. The handshake today was in Kabarak, Mr. Speaker. Look at that handshake, I have said it earlier. That handshake will have very little implication on the goings of 2022. That I can say it without fear of any contradiction. So, Mr. Speaker, those who will visit Mzee Moi must go and visit him and tell him Pole. Yes, we need to tell Pole. He served us 24 years. So we tell him Pole. But those who want to come to the race in 2022, you don't need to make visits. You need to face us. Those of us who belong to another camp, you need to face us on issues. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank Honorable Oyotsi. He's now bona fide Secretary General of ANC. Barack Mulunga is no longer Barack Mulunga is no longer the Secretary General. So congratulations to Oyotsi. Part 6. So Honorable Kamket, relax. Relax, you know you are coming, you are happy. We are somewhere waiting for you guys. Honorable Speaker, part 6 of the bill. He's a good friend of mine, Mr. Speaker. Part 6 of the bill deals with the local content and training. Very, very important, Mr. Speaker. Contractors to comply with all environmental, health, safety, and maritime laws in upstream. Speaker, I'm happy Honorable Chachu is sitting here. In the north, there were companies that used to do exploration in the 60s and 50s. And they do exploration, they close it, and then they say we haven't found the required natural resource, either gas or petroleum or crude. Mr. Speaker, many years back, those wells and those ponds, they have dug. Because we are livestock keepers, so many people used to die. And there was a question of whether these companies actually are doing exploration or are they doing the dumping of toxic waste. So, but the only surgeon in the House and the Vice Chair and member for Endabase. And Mr. Speaker, I can confirm he's not a quack. He has gone through, you know, there are surgeons who are quacks. Who cheat. So I ask him to second this very important bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First and foremost, I want to thank the Majority Leader for moving the Petroleum Exploration, Production, Development and Production Bill 2017. And I want to second Mr. Speaker, but first and foremost, allow me to congratulate our Kenyan team. I think we've won today the first gold in the 800 meters through Wycliffe, Kinyamai. Mr. Speaker, 3 days ago also, three of my constituents won the number 1, 2, 3, although 2 of the constituents are operating from the neighboring country. But they also won the gold medal in Commonwealth. The Sabot live in both Kenya and Uganda, and we were separated by the colonialists on the border. Mr. Speaker, this is a very important bill. It's a constitutional bill, and as the Majority Leader put it, it has gone through the various process in the last parliament in the 2016, and later on the bill was returned. Mr. Speaker, looking at this bill, it repeals Chapter 308 of the laws of Kenya on the petroleum exploration and production. Therefore, what it means, Mr. Speaker, is that all the other laws concerning this bill are going to be affected. And therefore, this bill, by enacting it, it means it becomes a superior bill, and no other bill will be able to contradict it. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank my committee, led by our chair, the Honorable Kikaria. We've done public hearings. We went to various places on this bill. We visited Turkana, we were in Lokichar, we went to Kalokol, we went to Lodwa, and we visited other many places. Mr. Speaker, it was a very, it was an experience that was very informative. We also went to Lamu and many other places. Mr. Speaker, for the members' information, when it comes to petroleum, whatever happens at the site of exploration, development and production, that is called upstream. And when it comes to the pipeline, when we are now pumping the fuel, the crude oil to the site of where we want to market, that is called midstream. Then what happens after that in the lower side, where you are now selling, marketing, and all those issues, that is called downstream. Mr. Speaker, at the upstream, before the contractor goes and starts working there, they show an intent of expression. And with this intent of expression, what the bill is, the bill has looked at all these stages in terms of oil, crude oil and also gas. And Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the site of, before you go and do exploration, you do development, and you do production, once somebody shows an intent, then they sign, they sign what we call production sharing agreement with the ministry. This production sharing agreement allows the contractor to go to the site and do the exploration. More often, they might do exploration and not find anything. In 1947 in Kenya, at the Pate Island, Total and Shell did an exploration where they were trying to explore oil. And during the drilling, what they found was gas. And at that time, gas had no any other purpose. Therefore, what they did is they decided now to seal off, and that is called Pate 1. And this is a monumental feature within our country. At that time, Mr. Speaker, we didn't know that gas could be important. In the Pate 1, what they found was that the majority of the gas there contains 98% methane. This is the natural gas. Methane is used in generation of power. I can see Honorable Mule is listening. You know, when it comes, I'm now an expert in oil and all that. So, Mr. Speaker, whenever exploration is done, the local community is involved. This bill looks at what happens to the local community.
Sorry, the three ladies, what is exciting you? That must be the Honorable Mbarire, the Honorable Sabina Chege, and the Honorable Millie Odhiambo. The three of you are consulting so loudly, and particularly when you begin cackling, it's very disturbing. Please. No, don't update us on, that's not business. We are in business now.
At this stage, I'll reserve my comments on what is happening there, Mr. Speaker, and continue with the business. Mr. Speaker, this bill looks at what happens in terms of when an individual signs the production sharing agreements. These production sharing agreements, at one stage or another, they'll also come to this house. We've taken care of that in terms of this bill. And before now, they move into the next stage of development and production. They sign what we call field development plans. So these field development plans plus the production sharing contracts, they'll be brought to this house within 2 years. And within signing of the field development production plan, they'll be brought to the parliament within 30 days. That's provided in this act, in this bill, so that parliament can be able to look at and how it is going to impact in terms of the local community. Mr. Speaker, this has also looked at in terms of the local content. And when you talk of local content, at what stage are we talking about? Because given, for example, what happened during the SGR, when you were building the SGR, you decide that you want to engage to train plumbers on the SGR. Then some politicians might insist and say that we want the local content to be the people from within the SGR is being built. When SGR moves from there to Naivasha, if you insist now that you want to have the local people, the ones who had been trained in Mombasa on their way to SGR to Nairobi, means they are going to be jobless. So this issue of local content needs to be looked at very carefully, because are we talking about our country as Kenya? Local content means within the nation. Because that means that if we train somebody, let's say now we have, in Kenya we have, for the members' information, we have 67 blocks of oil fields. These 67 blocks, 37 of them are found within the Lamu Belt. The other ones are now found in Turkana, Mandera, Wajir, talking of the Nakuru and El Mendaita and the other parts of Rift Valley. So if the oil is now found in Turkana, where then you decide you want to train your engineers, they must be coming from Turkana only and not another place. What it means is that when you move into Wajir or Mandera or Lamu, they become jobless. So these are things that members will need to be able to discuss and give you information when you are deciding on what is local content. When you talk again of local content, when it comes to even issues of banking, issues of services, when you talk of local services, meaning even banking services, do we have a bank that is within there, or the bank is a Kenyan bank? So these are issues, and more often, you might find that when you talk of even local content, it is the middlemen who are going to benefit because they'll get it and then subcontract somebody else to do it. So these are issues, and you must also be able to think in terms of local content, in terms of training and all that. When it comes to oil production, the Kenyan crude oil, which has been found in Turkana, is majorly has low sulfur content, but it's also waxy. When at the stage of full production.
Let me interrupt again. Honorable Pukose, you are seconding as the chairperson, isn't it?
Yes.
And therefore you have 30 minutes.
Yes.
Just want this light not to distract you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that guidance. So when these are issues that will need members to be very well informed and guided when it comes to what is their local content, because issues to do with the local content has created problems. Issues to do with local content has been misinterpreted, and it will be very important that this House looks at those issues. Mr. Speaker, I was saying that the crude oil that has been found in Turkana is majorly waxy. It is low sulfur content, meaning it's a good quality. And at the end of the day, at full production, you will end up, at full production, will be producing maybe around 1 million barrels per day. When you're producing 1 million barrels per day, and we'll need to look at it. What happens within the midstream? That is, after you've produced the oil, that is, you've done the drilling. Drilling is done by rigs, and you bring it to the wellhead. Then from there, you are transporting it to maybe to the storage facilities. So you have a pipeline which you're going to build. You build a pipeline from Lokichar all the way to Lamu. So this is still within the midstream. At Lamu, what do we think of as a country? Because in the modern societies, what happens in the production of crude oil is not just meant for production of diesel, petrol, and paraffin. Okay? It has more than that. The crude oil will be used for production of fertilizers. It will be used for production of petrochemicals. It will be used for we will need to establish industries at the site, and this is still at the midstream. So as you set up the oil refinery, how much do we have? And that is actually the essence of having the lab set, so that you have Sudan pulling in, you have Uganda pulling in, and you have a big refinery that can be able to do all these things, petrochemicals, crude oil, and all this. And Mr. Speaker, this bill has looked into all those aspects. What we've also done is, in our country, Mr. Speaker, one of the biggest challenges, about 10 million. But out of the 10 million, what gets into the consumers is about 2 million. The rest 8 million is adulterated fuel. And that has affected the economies of this country because Tanzania will not trust fuel from Kenya, Uganda will not trust fuel from Kenya, the other regional countries will not trust fuel from Kenya because of fuel adulteration. And Mr. Speaker, these are things that we're looking into because between Nairobi and Busia, we have about 300 shambas, illegal petrol stations. Mr. Speaker, in this country also, we have another area that is also very dangerous, where we have gas manufacturing stations, which are also illegal, where they are putting gases for cooking gas, and these are done in a very unprofessional way. Because for one, they don't meet the standards of KEPS. These are, maybe the gas is little, maybe they are leaking, and they are dangerous. And more often you hear of gas explosions within houses. And I think a day or two ago in Mathare, we had a gas explosion. So you ask yourself, could this be part of what is happening illegally in this country? And Mr. Speaker, in this law, we want those issues to be addressed and make it very punitive. Even we've made it very punitive, even for the driver of the lorry. For him, because the driver of the lorry is ferrying fuel. They are given a license by, you have your driving license, and you also have a license from the Energy Regulatory Authority. We want to make it very punitive, because once you are found doing adulterating fuel, because this is affecting the economy of this country. What it means is that we are not allowing you to move from one driving another lorry and taking your bad habits to another lorry. We should have a way of making it very punitive for you, such that you will never be able even to drive in the Kenyan roads. You will never be able to get yourself into any other lorry. So, Mr. Speaker, these are the things we've looked at in this law, and the committee has explored many of these. We've had many public meetings. We've had many public people giving memorandums. And the other area, Mr. Speaker, that we will need to look at is how we are able to put together the Energy Regulatory Commission and let UPRA to do the upstream and midstream, so that this can be effectively carried out without necessarily making it very difficult, so that for the, if you create many energy regulatory authorities, what it translates is that it makes it very difficult for if you want to operate, where are you going to get your license? Mr. Speaker, we've also taken care of in this bill the role of the county government, because in chapter 4 chapter 4 of the Constitution, it gives the county government to do reticulation and regulations in terms when it comes to gases and electricity. What it means is that we are seeing ourselves in future where, because we are doing a law for posterity, we'll see ourselves in future where you have gas distribution. You have gas being from one area, and it is distributed within the houses within the town. So you want the county government to be, because that is their constitutional mandate, should be able to look at it and be able to regulate how that is done. Also, when you're doing business in terms of opening a petrol station, you must also be able to meet the health standards. This law, we've provided that at the county level, you must also have the business premise license from the county government, so that they are able to understand what kind of business you are doing within that place and the safety of the people surrounding. Mr. Speaker, the roles of the county government have been clearly, they sent their memorandum. We've been able to look at it vis-a-vis the Constitution of Kenya, so that whatever is constitutionally mandated to them, we have been able to provide within this law. Whatever is provided for the national government, especially the cabinet secretary in terms of making policy standards and carrying out the guidelines in terms of the oil exploration, development and production is also taken care of. So with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the members to engage the committee in as far as other areas are concerned of this bill. And I think this is a bill for posterity for our country. Let's look at it as a bill for this nation. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I second this bill.
I propose a question that the Petroleum Exploration, Development and Production Bill, National Assembly Bill number 48 of 2017, be now read a second time. Member for Seme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me opportunity to contribute to this bill. Mr. Speaker, I stand to support this bill, and I must start by congratulating the team for the good work they've done, including the production of a report. Although we haven't seen the report, it was tabled today, but it means we can use it later before we go to the third reading. Mr. Speaker, this is an extremely important bill. It comes at a time when Kenya is now moving to an oil production stage. It will be among the countries that is producing oil. And Mr. Speaker, experience have shown that the discovery of oil in a country may not in itself be of much help in the economy. In fact, it may even cause problems in the economy. Therefore, there is need for a law, and that this law seems to meet that requirement very well. Mr. Speaker, when you have discovery, you get a rush for exploration. Very many companies will come in that they want to explore for oil. They need to be regulated. They need to be monitored. The Speaker, this bill provides for that. So, Speaker, there is also going to be a lot of speculation. The lands has been, as the law provides, has been divided in blocks, and I'm sure even before the blocks are really registered, there may be a lot of speculation. People think that if they get these pieces of land and they get the blocks, they have the prospect of getting oil being discovered in their blocks and enriching themselves. So, Mr. Speaker, that is important. Mr. Speaker, this is important even on our continental shelf. We are aware that actually there's a dispute with one of our neighboring countries regarding the continental shelf. It's because once you have oil, it is quite possible that even within the sea or the ocean, we may have some, and already we have a dispute regarding that. Therefore, we need a law that will actually make sure that all these are protected. Mr. Speaker, in other countries, when oil has been discovered, you found really a merciless exploitation of local people. This bill takes care of this in terms of the local content, and as Honorable Kosia said, we have to clearly look at the definition of local content so that it does not really give us a problem in the management of our oil industry. Mr. Speaker, if a country is not careful, you can get severe damage to the environment if the people who are managing, who are doing the exploration, who are exploiting the oil are actually not put under constant check with a proper legal framework. Mr. Speaker, as more oil becomes available, other problems come, as you have heard, the problem of adulteration, the problem of illegal manufacture of other byproducts. And these are things that we need to look at. Mr. Speaker, even more important is how the proceeds of oil is utilized. There are countries where, as the countries get richer because of the oil, the people actually get poorer, sometimes to the extent that they do not even get the oil itself to use. So, Mr. Speaker, those are all issues that we must look at. We must look at whether the proceeds of the oil that we have will go into investment or go into conspicuous consumption, and later on, we are in a sorry state where a rich country with oil has not ventured into other areas that may support it once the oil, being a resource that can be exhausted, runs down. So this bill, Mr. Speaker, provides all this. In part 2, Mr. Speaker, as we have all heard, it gives this bill is supreme. It will therefore guide and harmonize all the other laws that are in place. And, Mr. Speaker, this bill gives power to the executive, particularly the cabinet secretary, to develop a policy, to develop strategy of upstream development of oil. That is extremely important. If we get oil, we have no policy, we have no strategy, we have no proper laid down plans for even utilizing the proceeds. It will actually probably do more harm to us than good, at least to majority of the people. Mr. Speaker, this bill also establishes institutions. It clearly defines the role of the cabinet, the role and function of the cabinet secretary in regulating and monitoring the oil industry in the country. That is extremely clear. The cabinet secretary will have to put plans that are actually shared, strategies that are shared. In Clause 12, Mr. Speaker, develops the National Upstream Petroleum Advisory Committee. Mr. Speaker, it clearly defines the membership. The committee is advisory, and therefore the role of the minister will depend on clear advice. It picks and it gives criteria for identifying people who will be that committee, people with experience that can advise the minister. It also, in Clause 13, it really clearly states the relationship between the minister and the committee and the advisory functions that arise from that. Mr. Speaker, in Clause 14, this bill establishes the Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority. In my mind, and having glanced through the bill, this is probably the most important institution that is established by this bill. Its functions are clearly indicated. If you look at Clause 15, you will find that it is an authority that will look at all aspects of oil, from upstream, midstream, downstream, licensing, agreements, all those will actually be looked at by this authority. And its functions are clearly, all those functions are clearly clearly outlined in Clause 15. Mr. Speaker, even during operations, there will be need to regulate, to inspect, and to see how all these operations are going on, to look at equipment that are brought, equipment that are, and infrastructure that is developed, and all those are clearly provided for in the law. And it has powers to enforce these laws. It has powers to investigate complaints. It has powers to provide guidelines. So, Mr. Speaker, if this law is passed and we implement it, I think we will go into the oil industry very well protected as a country. Mr. Speaker, that same authority has a board of directors, and if you look at the qualifications that are required for the board of directors, the chairman and all the other members and the terms of the board of directors, and you find that, Mr. Speaker, this has been a very well thought out bill. although I do realize that in terms of membership, there is, I think, overemphasis on the role of the executive. We may have to look more and make amendments so that stakeholders can also be involved. In part 4, Mr. Speaker, we have this management of the rights of upstream management, and these are all invested, all resources, upstream resources, the resources that are still in the ground are actually vested in the national government. But the bill also takes into consideration the requirements that the county governments are it's also involved. Mr. Speaker, it also gives provision for reporting information that is so important that sometimes explorers, oil explorers, and those who are running the industry may keep away from the government and therefore inhibit proper regulation. With that, Mr. Speaker, I think we should support this bill.
Member for Mwala.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. From the onset, I would like to say that I've had the opportunity to look at this bill for 2 times. Once during the last parliament, and when the bill was returned to parliament with the presidential reservations. Then for the second time, I'm also sitting in the Energy Committee. And therefore, I have had the opportunity to look at the bill exhaustively. Mr. Speaker, this bill, I would say, is the long-awaited one because it lays a framework for early export of oil. As we speak, we have some potential oil that can actually be exported, but there lacks a framework and a law to enable this to take place. Mr. Speaker, the Big Four cannot survive without energy as a driver. And on average, we expect to be exporting on average, slightly higher than what Sudan is doing, over 500,000 barrels, and that translates to 1.1 trillion annual. And therefore, this is an interesting opportunity for Kenyans. And Mr. Speaker, as a member of the Committee on Energy, we have learned by engaging people who have done this before, how to do things and how not to do them. And oil is a potential cause of conflict. And this bill addresses some of those issues very well. For any country that has not done things properly in the business of producing oil, they will tell you local content, local content, local content. How you engage the local community, how you share the revenue is of key interest. Mr. Speaker, this bill, any contractor who wishes to explore an opportunity relating to oil in this country is first on entry expected to sign a production sharing contract. This document allows a contractor through the consent by government to go and find oil, and they agree if you find oil, this is a percentage you're going to receive and this is a percentage the government is going to produce. This document is of interest to Parliament because it must be ratified by Parliament. The share of the national government, according to this bill, has extended beyond what we call a devolution, which goes to the county, to address the local community from where the resource is found. And the local community is defined as a sub-county. And therefore, clearly, the sub-county where oil is found is going to get a good percentage, which, as stated by the law, is 5%, but as deliberations, and we've engaged through public participation with our able chair, and deliberations which have strengthened this bill and the relationship with the community, so that once production is started, we don't fall into trouble. And therefore, with a county getting, say, 20%, local communities say getting 10%, 20%, Mr. Speaker, translates to 100 billion for 500,000 barrels. And this will go a long way, of course, with capping. Mr. Speaker, this Honorable House represents Kenyans, and the Kenyans, they represent the honorable members who need to go far, creating goodwill, because it is just not about this particular resource. Maybe tomorrow we are going to find another resource, and we need the public goodwill. Mr. Speaker, this bill proposes to create an authority to manage issues to do with upstream petroleum, but you will have noted that with the bill we have dispensed of, the energy bill, that we have ERC. And it is our feeling as a committee that there is no point of duplicating, because tomorrow we are going to have another nuclear authority, we find another potential source of energy, we create another authority. It is our feeling that all this need to come together under maybe the Energy Regulatory Commission, and then we create departments to manage the subsectors. And therefore, that is also going to save the country on the expenditure. Mr. Speaker, information and reporting, you may be surprised that when we first hit oil in Turkana, London was the first one to know, before our minister knew. And this is terrible because it influences markets. And therefore, this bill is very firm. We have tried to be deliberately punitive to contractors releasing information prematurely before that information goes to our government. And that is properly addressed. There is also information in as far as what the contractor is doing. Mr. Speaker, once a contractor signs a production sharing contract, he is expected to do what we call a field development plan that says we are going to do this number of oils, this is a period of time. And we do not want a contractor who says they are doing ABCD, but they are actually doing other things, and they are not releasing that information to government. One thing that also needs to be addressed in this bill that does not come out clearly is the audit of the contractor. So that basically what we believe is the information we are getting from the contractor. You know, we are supposed to pay this contractor a certain percentage until they recoup all their investment. And therefore, it is very possible that they exaggerate. If they tell us these are our expenditures, this is what it costs us to do to explore, how do we know if we do not invest in an auditor who is stationed at the point of exploration as the point of production? Mr. Speaker, waste management is an issue. Oil has a byproduct called brine. Its effects, we've engaged on public participation. Some say that once you were exposed to this, you will not be able to give birth. You will also not be able to make somebody pregnant. We are yet to find the truth around that, but we all agree that there are side effects. There are contractors actually who drill and leave exposed oils that can endanger the local community. And also we try as a parliament to be very punitive to these reckless contractors. Mr. Speaker, we need to move in parliament, as a parliament swiftly and address issues, potential issues of way leave, issues of compulsory acquisition, because remember, contractors who's been given authority to go and explore.
Member for Laikipia West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I also like to support. Mr. Speaker, this is an extremely important bill that we are considering here today. And it is also important because of the new realities in our country, especially the discovery of oil in some parts of this country. Now, there are many stories that you hear, and there are many issues that you hear in Africa and elsewhere about the discovery of oil, and that the possibility of discovery of oil being in itself occurs to that country. And we have examples across Africa where oil has been discovered, but then that has meant community instability and all that. Now, I think clearly Kenya is taking a different path, especially reading through this bill. Clearly, there is a commitment that we want to take a path to stability, especially in discovering this oil. Now, Mr. Speaker, it will be important, even for this committee at some point, and indeed the members, to consider looking through the experience in Norway. I read through that actually, even some of the developed countries that have discovered oil have tended to borrow a lot from what is happening in Norway. And one of the lessons that come through from Norway is that you cannot manage oil in a sustainable manner, in a successful manner, unless you have a very robust, a very comprehensive, and a very clear legal infrastructure. And it's not just the legal infrastructure, but also the institutional infrastructure. And in my mind, reading this through this bill, it is very clear. The legal provisions are very clear. The institutional provisions allowed oil governance in our country is very clear. And I just want to point a few of them. One of them is the whole question of the National Upstream Petroleum Policy and Plan. Now, it is important for us as a country to know that we are not going to govern the law, we are not going to assume the oil governance without a very clear policy and plan. It is not at the whims of the cabinet secretary. It should not be at the whims of whoever. It must be, the oil in our country must be governed through a very clear national upstream petroleum policy and plan that the cabinet secretary is obligated under the bill to develop. And it is not also for the cabinet secretary responsible to go somewhere and develop a policy and plan. It must be developed through an extremely consultative way and process. Remember, the Constitution is also very clear. When you come up with such a plan and policy, the people must be involved. Those who are affected, and indeed those who are affected is across the entire country. All Kenyans have an interest, have a direct interest on this issue of oil. And so development of the National Upstream Petroleum Policy and Plan must be developed through a consultative process. The second pretty noble provision in this law is allowed the local development plan. The law is very clear. When the contractor comes in place, that contractor is obligated under this bill to develop a local development plan. What is interesting and what is important and what is critical for us to note as this House is that actually Parliament has been put at the center of that local development plan, unlike what happens usually. And so when the contractor moots and develops the local development plan or crafts the local development plan, that plan within a specific period must be tabled in the House for Parliament to engage. And that in itself is also a lesson from Norway, that Parliament is at the center of oil governance. And A third issue that is critical to note in this bill is about the decommissioning. When a contractor or an agent or whoever has been given a block, and after exploration, the final conclusion of that exploration, there is always a decommissioning phase. And in many parts of Africa, after the exploration, the contractor is not obligated in law to do a phased-out decommissioning of that block. And what this law does is actually to obligate the contractor to actually set certain funds to be used for decommissioning. That is important. Otherwise, you don't want blocks in the country that have been exploited and left open. And so this law obligates the contractor to actually set up some funds from the onset and from the beginning, so that that money can be used when the exploration is done. The fourth critical aspect of this law that I think is important is considering the blocks as an aspect of the present, but also of the future. In Norway, what they have done is actually to only give out a certain percentage of the blocks, so that it is not just the money that comes from the exploration and the oil that is kept for the future generation. It is also about the blocks, so that we don't want all the 16, I hear there are 16 blocks, all of them exploited at a go, or given to contractors at a go. We need to know that, and to agree and to commit to ourselves that certain blocks can be exploited now, others can be exploited into the future. And so, one of the other critical lessons from Norway is about the sovereign wealth, and is about the future generations, and realizing that this oil is not just for us here today, it's for many, many generations to come. And in any case, in the event this oil is exploited fully, there will be money for future generations to use that money. In fact, in Norway, I saw that they use only 4% of the sovereign wealth, of the wealth they get from the oil. And it is so much that I think 2 or 3 years ago, they actually reduced the amount they will get from the sovereign wealth from 4% to 3%. Considering about that future generation, and that is critical. Mr. Speaker, it is important to get another lesson from Norway, that the issue of oil, we must put government at the center. The government must be the owner and the regulator in the industry of oil. We must not put communities to be communities vis-a-vis communities, or regions vis-a-vis other regions. We must put government at the center of oil governance in our country, as well as a regulator. If we don't do that, then we'll be saying this region versus that region, this community versus this community, and this county versus this county, and we shall never agree. We must agree as a country, let government be at the center. And then the government then must commit, when parliament is there, and whoever else, to transparency and accountability on how the oil governance is done, but also how the money gotten from the oil is applied for economic growth. Mr. Speaker, another issue is, which I think is critical in this bill, is that we must not combine the contractors who apply for licensing for upstream exploration must not be the contractors who are involved in the downstream operations. That is to say, those that exploit oil must not be given licenses to distribute the end product to homesteads. That is important, so that then at that point, we are making sure that the operations and accountability at the 3 levels, in fact the 3 levels, the upstream, the midstream, and downstream must be separated, so that we have contractors at that level, because there is a check and balance that comes with separation. Otherwise, if we combine one contractor is the one doing upstream, midstream, and downstream, we shall have corruption, and then we have issues around that. Mr. Speaker, to conclude, it's also, and very important, any information that is gotten by the contractor on issues of geology and other information around those blocks must not belong to those contractors. That information must be made public and must belong to government. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Member Fondiwa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this bill. And Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of work which has gone into this bill, and I really congratulate the committees from 11th Parliament to today. Mr. Speaker, I just want to have a comment on part 3, the rights and obligations, especially in clause 10, joint liabilities and indemnity. Mr. Speaker, there's some statements that has been made there, which I think, in my opinion, will give the contractors a leeway. For example, on the environment, it's written that the contractor will not cause as little damage as possible. I think there is a huge loophole, knowing what contractors are and companies that does this business. The same word is used in the next clause 16, reasonable. I think this should have standards. So all this should point to some standards that we have set that will guide these contractors. Mr. Speaker, there's also another clause 12, still under part 3, rights and obligations. Mr. Speaker, in Florida, there was an accident in upstream exploration of oil. And accidents do occur, and when enjoys. This took months because there was no clear how compensation can be done on both the city of Florida as well as the people who earn their life along the coast, the fishermen and also the marine players. So, Mr. Speaker, I think this can also happen to our coastal region, especially the upstream exploration of oil. Mombasa is the hub of tourism, and we as a country depend on that for foreign income. If we don't have a specific, if we fail to have specific measures that can guide the compensation, Mr. Speaker, then we may lose out, just as it took a long time for the state of Florida to settle the massive spillage of oil. And that can be damaging to the local population, especially in their earning of living. Now, Mr. Speaker, in another area which I think has been elaborately expressed by you, actually, when you were contributing, the community good, the corporate social responsibility. I've gone a bit through this, but I didn't see it quite specific. We say a certain percentage should be remaining to the sub-counties, but sub-counties can also be large. Maybe it might be reasonable enough to cascade those percentages to the areas where the exploration is really being done, because that is where the damages can be real bad to the local population. And while doing that, I think it will be also prudent to state clearly all these amenities that constitutes community good, like hospitals, schools, that be considered. So when the contractor is on the site, he knows very well that this is expected from me. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the managers or the implementers of this corporation or petroleum corporation, if only left for the executives and there is no stakeholders' voice strongly streamlined in this, it can also lead to what they call black gold cash, and because there will be nothing trickling to them. I suggest that we should explore how the community voice can come up all through
the exploration areas through the county to the authority or the commission which is going to be established. With that, Mr. Speaker, I think there's a lot of work done in this bill, and if implemented rightly, will safeguard the interest of the community. So I stand to support.
Very well. Should we have Hurufo, Honorable Hurufo Order, member for Isiolo North. I guess I got the name correctly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this very important bill. I must say that this bill is very timely. I think as a country, from the time we had oil discovered in Turkana County, by now we should be actually utilizing the products from those wells. But unfortunately, due to lack of laws to regulate issues surrounding utilization of petroleum, which has been discovered, I think it has led to delay. I must say that this is a very comprehensive bill, and it clearly stipulates that it mainly deals with upstream petroleum. Of course, has three main sectors: the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream. But this particular bill specifically relates to upstream, which basically means it regulates how we can bring the crude oil below the surface to the surface and probably drill the wells, operating the wells, and so on and so forth. The rest of the issues like midstream and downstream, I think, is dealt with by the energy bill, which we debated yesterday. I thank the committee for doing a very comprehensive job. And actually, most of the areas which are assumed to be having petroleum reserves lie in areas which were previously categorized as marginalized areas. Of course, we no longer continue talking of marginalization after the current constitution came into force, and we were able, as formerly marginalized counties, to get our fair share from the national government. And therefore, there are a lot of fears and hopes. For example, in my own county, we suspect we have an exploited petroleum reserve. But in as much as we would like these reserves to be explored, there has always been fear that anywhere in Africa where oil has been discovered, it has turned out to be a curse rather than a blessing. Instead of generating wealth and improving well-being of local communities, it has actually turned out to be something which actually makes their lives to be worse off. But with this bill now, I am confident that wherever we are going to have petroleum explode in this country, as a country, we are going to generate very good income and improve our collective well-being. And it is also going to ensure that local communities have fair share. And I particularly like the way local community is defined, because at times, in as much as we assume communities or what we call local communities are homogeneous and they have no local interests, at times we realize that if we don't define the what local community is properly, we may have issues when it comes to sharing the revenue. And Article 84, how the share of the government share from petroleum income is going to be shared is clearly defined. What goes to the national government, what goes to the county government, and what goes to the local community. And the local community is defined on the basis of a sub-county, which I think is fair enough. At times, if you define it on the basis of those who live around the wells, it becomes a challenge, because where I come from, for example, the land is collectively owned. And that ownership, what is owned collectively by the communities, are actually ecosystems which at times are even larger than sub-counties. And therefore, unless the proposed bill has defined the way the local community has been defined, it will have created more problems, and so on and so forth. And Mr. Speaker, another important aspect which, again, the bill has clearly defined, which is also going to help us to avoid
conflict between national government and the county governments. Of course, Kenya is, we have devolution, but it's a unitary state. And therefore, the counties cannot probably claim natural resources like oil. And therefore, the proposed bill clearly defines actually in which government it is vested. It is vested in national government, and the national government is going to actually manage it in trust for the people of Kenya. And that aspect is, again, a very important thing, which I think is going to help us to address the fears and hopes of our people. Mr. Speaker, when I look at the part which relates to sharing of the revenue, although probably we shall raise this at the point when probably we are going to move some amendments, especially what is proposed to be the share of county government, and the rider that the 20% should not be more than what the county government gets from the national government. Probably we may raise some issues there, but we are going to move some amendments when we reach there. The same applies to the 5%, which is earmarked for the community. But another good aspect is creating a specific account.
The bills and the laws that governs its exploration and having a mechanism for it to control, for us to thwart any other plans of conflict that can be able to come as a result of this product. But one thing is quite clear, that this bill has been very exhaustive. It has looked at all issues so that they can be able to seal other loopholes that can be able to come around as a result of the exploration of the same. But one thing I think it's worth to note, that oil potentials exist in the north, and other shores of the sea, and other shores that are holding water. But one thing that is of importance is that this product, as far as our knowledge and as far as our product, which has been exploited, can be of benefit to the locals in that region, because this product is likely in the future to change the lifestyle and the livelihood of the people in the region. But one thing that is of significant, and as I've gone through this bill, is that I've observed it has been able to categorize the community interest and given a specific percentage and defined community as and the county and properly defined. Because the percentage, the specific percentage which have been given for the communities and a specific percentage which have been given to the county government. But one thing is quite clear, that communities have properly been defined. If I look through the entire bill, there is a lot of emphasis of community interest, which has always overlooked in the past. Other development that have been coming up in the region has obviously overlooked the same. But this bill has given a specific emphasis on communities. Particularly, it has given a peanut amount of 5%. But I think that can be changed as we continue to make amends on what percentage goes to communities and what percentage goes to the county government. So, and what percentage goes to the national government. And those, I think, changes will be done as we proceed to the next stage in regards to the amendments of this bill. But nonetheless, exploitation of this product and the way it's clearly defined and the various percentages of various interests being given is a clear testimony that this bill is trying to look at all interests of everybody who is likely to benefit from this product. The other thing that is of great significance is the issue of environmental management and environmental assessment, which is likely to affect the exploration of oil. Further to this bill has clearly emphasized the issues of environmental impact assessment to see how this product, if exploited, is likely to affect other livelihoods or other environmental issues that are in the region. But those things should be looked at critically and see how this bill can be harmonized with other environmental acts that exist in the nation, like the MCA Act and those other acts that exist, so that they can be able to be harmonized and there's no conflict and anything that is likely to deter the future exploration and development of the same. Finally, this energy exploration, the petroleum exploration product, this product is of great significance. It has to, and any company that is likely to operate within this region, both in the upstream and the downstream, should have a clear, demarcated support to local communities, whether through not only the percentages that exist, but issues like the social responsibility that is mandatory should also be reflected before even the initial exploration and the potential has been determined. The initial onset of the company trying to operate, they should be able to float certain community interests which can be of importance to the people that is going to offer. Finally, what we have realized in the past, many operations and particularly exploration of oils, particularly in the north, have resulted in an open environment where there's no control. They are looking for mainly for petroleum, but in the course of doing that, they are likely to gather certain other gemstones, other coral or stones which are of significance to the people. There should be a specific declaration and control on the same so that they can be directed specifically for the community that they have been warranted to do. Otherwise, exploration on oil may give them an opportunity to look at others, and they should be given right to declare so that the community interest in terms of safeguarding other gems and other stones that exist in the region
give a lady member now, and that vote goes to the newest lady member, Honorable Edith Nyenze. You have the floor. You get the mic shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I'm the newest member of parliament, as you have said. My name is Edith Nyenze, MP for Kitui West, and I would like to make my maiden speech. But before I do that, I want to comment on the current bill on petroleum. I want to urge the researchers to also go to Kitui County and try to explore for petroleum, because this one, I'm sure, it's a very dry area, and this one would really help our people. It will improve our economy, and we have a big problem of unemployment in our place, and I'm sure the youth will really get helped. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, let me make my maiden speech. I would like to take this opportunity to thank those who made it possible for me to be a member of this August House. And I especially, above everything, thank God that He made it possible for me to be here. Because the Bible says that those ones who build a house, they would labor in vain if God was not involved in the construction or in the building. So in making of Edith Nyenze as an MP, God was involved, and I praise Him, I thank Him. Let me also take this opportunity to thank the people of Kitui West. The great people of Kitui West made it possible for me to be elected through a by-election. It was actually after the passing on of a member of parliament, my late husband, Francis Mwanzia Nyenze. And I thank them for the trust they have in me. And let me also thank this House, especially the members of parliament, for your contribution, especially during the burial of my husband. You did so much. You showed so much love. Your contribution was, I will not even explain. You came to visit us, you contributed, and that has really helped the family and also went a long way in his burial. So I thank you. I thank you for the support. I also thank you for welcoming me to this house. You've been very friendly for this 1 week. I'm grateful. And this shows how much you loved him. And I sincerely thank you. I also thank my Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka for the support he gave during my campaigns. Together with the principals, they actually supported me. So I'm very grateful to them for the support. I will not forget to thank all my supporters who stood with me in the campaigns. There are many of them, but above all, I've said I sincerely thank God. What will I do for the people of Kitui West? As I've said, I've been elected through a by-election, and my mentor, my political mentor, was during my campaigns. I promised to also be to work with honesty, with all the truth, and I'm sure that is why you trusted me. What do I tell my opponents, the ones I was campaigning with? I tell them now the deal is sealed. It's now Edith Nyenze, MP for Kitui West. Please come, we work together. Come, we work together. I'm sure you had an agenda for Kitui West. So you're invited to develop the constituency with me. About Kitui West, I'm sure now that we have problems which are experienced all over Kenya, especially in employment of the youth. I will not promise to give a solution to this, but I promise to partner with others to come up with a solution. Because most of our youth are languishing in poverty after their parents have spent all they have to educate them. There is no employment. And this one is very disturbing. To us as leaders, it's very disturbing to the parents. So I'm joining the other legislators to try to come up with a solution. Now there are rains in my constituency, Kitui West constituency, and the whole of Ukambani. There's a lot of rainfall. And some people have died, been swept away by water because of the heavy rains. What I want to tell my people is that during this time, let's be careful so that we avoid more deaths. And the other thing I would say that our roads are in poor conditions because of the rains. I want to partner with the governor. I will also, through the other legislators, we'll go through Kera to make sure that the roads are brought back to the condition they should be in. Otherwise, I thank God. I thank my mentor for giving me a mentor who I've said is my husband. And I'll try to fit in his shoes, but I will not pretend that I'll be him. I'll be myself, and I'll do my best to serve the people of Kitui West. So I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your attention and giving me this opportunity, and look forward to working with your office and the other members of parliament in building this great country, Kenya. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Thank you.
Very well. You can tell from the applause from the members, they did actually appreciate that Maiden speech from the newest member. And once again, you're welcome. I'll actually give to the neighbor seated next to you, the Honorable Eve Obara from Kabodo Kaspul. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to speak today. As you have rightly said, my name is Ivo Barra, the MP for Kabondo Kasipul. First and foremost, let me thank God for giving me the opportunity to be here in Parliament. Secondly, I want to thank my constituents for electing me.
Just to be clear, is that your
This
maiden?
is my maiden speech.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, very well. Proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My apologies. Secondly, let me thank my constituents for electing me to be the Member of Parliament for Kabondo. I would also like to thank my party, and in particular my party leader, for standing with us. And in the county, Homa Bay County, we actually have 3 women elected in the single constituency. Let me thank him for the space that he created and allowed us, or made it possible, that we stand, and we actually eventually won the seats, the 3 of us. In Homa Bay County, I want to proudly stand here today and say that we have a representation of 50-50, including the women rep. We have 4 MP women and 4 MPs men. I think we are the only, most likely the only county with that kind of representation in the country. Thirdly, or fourthly, I want to make reference to the handshake. And as I stand here, I don't want to take it for granted that the bold step that was made by our 2 leaders to reconcile this country, I want to thank them and appreciate them. Even as we sit here in Parliament, I think we will all agree that that handshake has made a big difference in this House. The temperatures have been lowered, the environment is friendlier, and I think we are all now working together as a team. Let us thank the 2 leaders most sincerely for this act of selflessness. On the core issues, let me go back to my constituency and make this commitment in this House. On the core issues that affect them, mainly water issues, as much as it's not the mandate of the MP, I know that I have the ability and will collaborate with those agencies to make sure that water is brought close to their homes. Being a woman, I cannot underrate what water does in a community. And the women and the children don't have to walk those long distances anymore by the time I complete my term to have water closer to their doorsteps. There is one produce that commonly comes from Kabondo Kasipul, and this is the potato, the sweet potato. If you've been following some newspaper articles some years back, not the Queen, it's the King, or Prince Charles, on the breakfast table of the Prince of Britain, the sweet potato is part and parcel of what is on the breakfast table. And yet, the people who produce this sweet potato actually benefit from nothing. A debe of potato goes for 200 shillings in Kabondo. And the same potato, 1 kilo of the same potato in Nakumatt or Ruchumi or any of the supermarkets, Tusky, name it, the same 200 shillings will fetch you a kilo of potato. And this is the main crop. The women toil day and night, every day trying to produce this crop. We have to find a market, and I will be on the forefront of finding a market and make sure that the people of Kabondo Kasipul get benefit out of their labor while toiling on the land. Mr. Speaker, finally, on the bill that is on discussion today, I want to stand here and support the bill. The first reason why I'm supporting this bill is that the bill will ensure that the revenue that is generated from these communities will actually be shared for the benefit of all. And that these same benefits will be clearly defined. I'm also supporting it for the reason that there will be a clear way of monitoring on what has been extracted. That finally, whatever comes out, you'll be able to calculate and know what is due for your community. With those not very many and not too few remarks, may I support the bill and thank you once again for giving me this opportunity to speak for the first time in this House. Thank you very much. Okay.
Before giving to your neighbor, I have to go to my right. Honorable bill also points out the hazards that comes with oil exploration, especially the environmental hazards. Mr. Speaker, you can look at, if you look at Nigeria, especially when you look at the oil river areas, which is the Delta region, which is actually an oil-producing area in Nigeria, it has become extremely polluted. I think as in Kenya, because we are a newly oil-producing region, we have taken the right steps so that any producer, any contractor, any company that is going to be involved in mining, in production. Mr. Speaker, you can imagine the effects of oil spill and the detriments it is going to cause to the environment. So I want to say that this bill has gone a long way to ensure that we as a new oil-producing country are putting into consideration and taking measures to stop the issue of environmental degradation. Mr. Speaker, I also want to point out the issue of dispute resolution. We as a nation, we are actually very new in this field, but we envisage that disputes will arise amongst communities, amongst companies, amongst individuals and institutions involved in oil production. So the bill has gone ahead to try to ensure that any particular dispute that comes up is resolved amicably, is solved, and the gains are actually distributed well. Finally, on revenue, Mr. Speaker, the bill has spelled out very clearly how the revenue from oil is supposed to be distributed. From amongst the communities, the county governments, and the national government. And in fact, the bill has spelled out very clearly. And in fact, in regions that are yet to discover oil, and I want to point out that, Mr. Speaker, in the Lake Basin, where I also fall, the regions of Shemase and parts of Miwani. And if the exploration is going on, Mr. Speaker, I know this bill has catered for those individuals who sit where oil is. And I believe in that part of the world, one time, one day, oil shall be discovered, and this bill is going to cater for our interest, especially in revenue sharing between the national government, the individuals, and even the county government. Mr. Speaker, I beg to support. Thank you so much. Honorable Odiabo Accord, member for Suba North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. And Mr. Speaker, before I speak to the bill, allow me to indicate that I'm extremely privileged this evening or this afternoon, sitting between two powerful women members of parliament. And Mr. Speaker, I must say that because it is not easy for women to get into elective positions, especially seats where you fight against men. Men tell us they love us, but so long where we compete against men, thank you. But when it comes to power, you become a totally different thing. The two members, Honorable Nyenze and Honorable Ivo Bara, are members of a sub-caucus of Kewopa called the Leading Women Caucus, who are women who have fought in the traditional constituencies. Mr. Speaker, a lot of us don't know how difficult it is when you just hear a woman
there's a rumor of a woman trying to be governor, or that the public are rumoring she wants to be governor, or even rise to a higher position, like Honorable Sabina Chege, you see the malignment that happens, that she can no longer even report a simple case of somebody conning other members, not even conning her. It suddenly becomes a sexual issue. Somebody was asking me the other day, why am I so preoccupied about these issues? Because it affects us as women daily. The men who don't wear the shoes don't know. When my other fellow men MPs speak and stand and speak on petroleum, that's all you see. But for us, when I stand and speak on petroleum, you assume other things beyond petroleum. And that is why I am privileged to be standing between two women who have taken the mantle of leadership in situations where it's difficult. And I encourage other women to go for it, despite and in spite what people tell. The women, including Sabina Chege, Honorable Sabina Chege, if they want her to go for governor, be it, even if it is deputy president, why not, Mr. Speaker? Kwani it's only men who must be, sorry, Kwani is not parliamentary, but is it only men who can be leaders? Mr. Speaker, now getting back to the bill. I want to say that the world is becoming extremely competitive. The last 24 hours, I had the privilege and honor of going to several African countries. And I had the privilege of, in the last 1 month, of using different airlines. And I can tell you, I was just challenged to see.
But in this bill, we are seeking to establish the Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, which is another regulatory authority similar to the ERC, Energy Regulatory Authority. Mr. Speaker, we are a small economy to accommodate many organizations of this nature. And in any case, Mr. Speaker, I remember some time back, this government was engaged in an exercise to merge various parastatals for effective management and to reduce costs. But now it seems we again are engaging in an exercise to create many parastate organizations. That is going to be a strain on our economy. Other countries, even in Africa, have adopted a regime of having one regulator. If you go to Rwanda, and that model has been assessed to be successful. This model of having petroleum, having a separate regulator from other forms of energy, it has been tried in Uganda. And I would advise the committee to seek information in Uganda. But there are challenges, because petroleum upstream is regulated differently from other energy resources. There are challenges there. It will be important for committee to seek information on how this can be done. Mr. Speaker, this bill refers to the tribunal, the Energy and Petroleum Tribunal. But I think there is a typo in the definition, because it refers to the Energy Act 26. The bill that we are currently about to discuss in the committee stage, the Energy Bill, it is Energy Bill 2017. But in the definition of this bill, the Petroleum Bill, it is making a reference to the Energy Act 26. So I think it's important for the committee to note that. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, under Part 2 of this bill, it also, just like the Energy Bill, also says the Cabinet Secretary in charge will develop and publish some policies or plans. In this case, what we call the Upstream Petroleum Strategy Plan. Mr. Speaker, I think the model adopted for the Energy Bill and the Petroleum Bill is laudable. But then,
it doesn't give mechanisms of oversighting what the minister publishes. I think the committee should consider amending that section so that the minister don't just publishes, but also he's accountable for what he publishes. Because it is easy to publish anything, but accountability is very important. Mr. Speaker, this bill under section 79 talks about a training fund. I think this is important because it is going to help this country develop the appropriate human resource on matters of upstream petroleum. And from the Nigerian experience, this is very important because one of the challenges that have been faced in Nigeria is that most of the resources human resources who are involved in management of petroleum were largely foreigners. But if we have a mechanism in which we can develop our own local capacity through training, I think that is laudable. Mr. Speaker, this bill also talks about of the government share, and that 20% should not exceed what is allocated by the national government. Then effectively what you are doing is that you are reducing what is equitably due to the county. And also the issue of the local community. The local community, I think we need to reconsider the definition because it limits the local community to a sub-county. Mr. Speaker, the resource may be in a particular sub-county, but this sub-county is surrounded by other sub-counties, which will be affected adversely if they are not considered in the sharing of revenue. And this is a problem that has been experienced even in Nigeria. When you talk about Niger Delta, competition among communities. So we need to look for a system in which the immediately neighboring sub-counties to this local community can find a way of benefiting from this very important resource. But Mr. Speaker, I'm also concerned that in the entire bill, there is no mention of corporate social responsibility. Mr. Speaker, this is a very important aspect. One may argue that these communities have benefited from other programs like training, local content, and revenue share. But if you look at experiences of other countries like Nigeria, the issue of corporate social responsibility is key. You've seen clashes in the Niger Delta, people fighting because of lack of roads, people fighting because of lack of sporting facilities. I think it's important that this bill looks in detail on the issue of corporate social responsibility. Mr. Speaker, this bill also needs, for those few remarks, I support the bill. Thank you.
Very well. Lastly, on that one, we have the only person in the screen that is Honorable Member for Nakuru Town East. Thereafter, the mover should be preparing to reply.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. First, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be able to contribute towards this very important bill. And I know my dear sister, Honorable Ses Mberire, will do the due diligence on behalf of the committee to be able to reply. Honorable Speaker, we just to explain the bill and what it's all about. Honorable Speaker, the Petroleum Bill, as it is, there are some sections within the Energy Bill which have been brought. It's very unfortunate but again, we'll have an opportunity in the Committee of the Whole House. There is a whole Part 5 in the Energy Bill which was moved to Petroleum Bill. It's unfortunate that members who are not able to look at the Part 5 of the Energy Bill to be able to contribute effectively to the Petroleum Bill. But I want to say, Honorable Speaker, this is a very progressive bill, brings a lot, so much for us to be able to address. And just to tell Kenyans that it is not easy as people might think, but having oil and exploring on oil. But the discoveries, and particularly the oil blocks that we are encouraging Kenyans to come together, get to financiers to be able to give you money, to be able to do, to go into the oil exploration. I know it's a very expensive venture, but I think, again, we cannot just leave this country to foreign companies who walk into the country, do exploration on all our minerals, particularly petroleum. And we Kenyans, we just sit and to wait and, you know, earn from the sharing revenue. I think it is important for Kenyans to start thinking seriously on how they can get some financial assistance, either even from locally or abroad, that they can be able to be given to be licensed as contractors and go into these oil blocks that, of course, one of our agency as a government under the name that National Oil Corporation is also doing some oil exploration in one of the blocks. And I think it will go a long way. It is an advantage to the country. Honorable Speaker, most of the other jurisdictions who have really excelled in petroleum production, they have an oil corporation that does whatever is being done by other players. And I think in those countries have really progressed because they have a corporation that is doing the same business that is. So we'd want to encourage Kenyans to be able to do as much as they can, and also to understand the petroleum industry. And Honorable Speaker, people have been confusing and not knowing what is upstream. Upstream is the exploration and production of crude oil. And midstream is more about refineries, the transportation, the pipeline, and the downstream is about the marketing, the petrol stations, or selling of the products. But I want to say, Honorable Speaker, that the exploration and discovery of oil in this country will go a long way. It's not only about the petroleum product. It is from the byproducts also that we can be able to get fertilizers. It is the same byproduct that we can be able to start plastic production in this country, and so many other businesses that this country will be able. In fact, we were in Lamu, and the Deputy Chair will attest to this, that it is again from production of some gas that very soon most of the ships will not be using fuel to be able to move. They will be using something else that will be coming out of production, because in Lamu there was in 1971, Honorable Speaker, this country did the first oil exploration in Pate Island in 1971. We were very surprised to find the rig that was there. And you know, it's a monumental, and I think Kenyan, the national heritage, they need to go to that and also try and conserve that place instead of getting oil, because that is what they found gas. And in the 1970, Honorable Speaker, gas was of no commercial use. Actually, most of the gas was being flared and burnt out, so that but now gas, I think, is the next frontier in this country. We have already, we have some people now doing the exploration of in Pate Island, and to them, I think there is a lot of prospects of gas, and very soon, Honorable Speaker, we'll be able. Honorable Speaker, I know people have been, of course, in their contribution. We've had them, but at the same time, the aspect of the provision of the sharing of revenue for us to be able to remove the provision to cap the sharing. Honorable Speaker, from the mathematics that we are given, it means one country will be receiving almost a third of what is given to the current counties in the country. So you can imagine, and of course, now to also take care of the rest of the country. The 50, or we are being told by then, almost 60 million Kenyans. Will be depending on that petroleum exploration. And it is also important for us because as we are looking at that, we are looking at also the inclusion of a pipeline. Some people are saying, how much oil do we have? The same companies have accepted to venture into the investment of the pipeline of over 800 kilometers all the way from Turkana to Lamu. And that means then we have, in fact, from the few lessons that we had with the current Talo company that is doing exploration in Turkana, is that of the class A, B, and C, we are now at C, where we can produce so much and be able to give. And the good thing, Kenyans that should know, is that our oil is of high quality, very low sulfur in it, much as it is waxy. It is going to be a product in the market that will fetch and will be on demand because of the low sulfur content in the, and the oil is there, Honorable Speaker. As we are talking over 3,000 barrels are already stored in some tanks in Turkana, but it has never left. And it is important for us to be able now to take that oil to the market so that the tests can be done, and then we can be able to start earning from this very, of course, we are happy that there is some talk going on regarding the pipeline. We appreciate, and we ask the minister to fast track the talk and start the pipeline construction so that we can be able to, last but not least, Honorable Speaker, we have also realized when we were doing our public participation that most of these very important installations, we don't have security. And we would want to ask the minister in charge of internal affairs and security docket to be able now to start assigning some security personnel to this very critical installation. Again, the way they are, they can just be, even in Lamu, when we were talking about a plant that will give us over 1,000 megawatts, we need to protect that very important installation. With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support the bill.
Let's have the mover to respond.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity to respond. But before I do so, allow me, being a member of the Energy Committee, to just say a bit of the process that took place from the time the bill was brought to the committee, or was committed to the committee, and up until today, where we are, and how we got to come up with the report that we have. Mr. Speaker, you are aware that pursuant to Article 118B of the Constitution and Standing Order 127.3, Parliament is mandated to undertake public participation in its business, including legislative business. And as a result, in furtherance of these legal requirements, the committee did put a notification that was placed in the mainstream print media on 22nd of February 2018, informing public that the committee was considering the Petroleum Bill 2017 and inviting them to submit any presentation they might have on the bill. And Mr. Speaker, the committee also held meetings with State Department of Petroleum in the Ministry of Petroleum and Mining to consider pertinent issues that the bill was seeking to address. Additionally, the committee did receive written memoranda and held meetings with various stakeholders, including the Council of Governors, KEPSA, Natural Justice, Kenya Oil and Gas Association, Turkana County Assembly, and Turkana County Government, and the Kenya Society of East Africa on Wildlife. In addition, Mr. Speaker, on receiving in addition to receiving the written memoranda from the stakeholders, the committee held public hearings in the following counties: Turkana County, and within Turkana County, the following sub-counties: Turkana East, Turkana South, Turkana Central, and then in Nakuru County, Menengai, Bahati, Nakuru County Assembly, and Naivasha. In Narok County, Suswa Ward, Murang'a County, Mathioya constituency, Nairobi County, County Hall, Parliament buildings, and Lamu County in Kwasasi, Pate, and Lamu
Honorable
Fort Hall.
Barreto, of course, I know you are an extremely seasoned member of this parliament. You see, this has been moved, so you are responding.
Yes.
If you could do it briefly, you know.
Okay, I will, Mr. Speaker.
Putting to members the next stage what would really be happening. It
Yes.
would be very good, of course, but I'm not saying that we are short of time, but I'm just saying so that it
Okay,
is.
okay, I'm well guided, Mr. Speaker. And from there, Mr. Speaker, the committee did hold a retreat in Mombasa for 1 week, where we were able to analyze close by close of the bill, and also, of course, taking into account the submissions that were received from members of public and from various stakeholders. And the report includes, Mr. Speaker, the committee made several observations, as you might have noted from the report, including the need to ensure participation of local communities in decision-making and by the various institutions in upstream, downstream, and midstream activities, increase of the local community share of revenue from 5% to 10%. And this, Mr. Speaker, is very important because we realize that part of the reason why other countries go to a lot of conflict is when communities do not benefit from the resource that is there. And out of that 10% that is going to the communities, including what will go to the county government, which is 20%, it is seen that the Turkana people will be receiving up to even 40%. Because of the two sub-counties that will receive each 10%. And we fully support that as a committee. Mr. Speaker, let me thank all the members that have contributed to this very important bill. I did hear one member asking why we do not have this bill amalgamated within the energy bill, but knowing how petroleum, the important role petroleum will play in the growth of this country, and knowing where certain countries have gone, have made mistakes in terms of this particular resource, where many people see it as a curse, it was felt that there was need to actually have a petroleum bill and even establish a state department of petroleum for that purpose alone. And I think that was so important so that it is very clear the legal framework that guides this particular important resource that we are getting to explore and exploit for the first time in our country. And Mr. Speaker, we also know that this is just the beginning of the many other opportunities we are likely to have in other counties and in other parts of this country, and we wanted to start just right, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also very important, and I think it has been mentioned by the chair, the mover, and the vice chair, is the role that communities will play going forward in terms of management of this particular resource, and the need to ensure that whatever comes out of the revenue that comes from these communities does actually change those communities. And so it is hoped that once we pass this bill, and as we start exploiting this.
Well done, Honorable Barire. I will not be putting the question because of the obvious reasons. So therefore, we will move to the next order. And in the meantime, order number 10 is put to a later date because that has, okay, let's have.
Order number 10, Committee of the Whole House.
Yes, as I would say, that is not going to be transacted today. It's going to be put to a later date. Proceed.
Order number 11, the Public-Private Partnerships Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 52 of 2017, second reading.
All right, I see the leader majority. Or that is Honorable Barire. Yes, you should be given just a minute. Yes, you have the mic now. Would you go to the next one, Honorable Barire, please?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we wish to step down this particular order of business until the next available date.
That is granted. Though, of course, I would have been happier with some reason, but since I've already granted it, I know since you have been very active as the leadership of majority, I know for sure there must be some good reason. Proceed.
Order number 12, the Kenya Coast Guard Service Bill, National Assembly Bill number 45 of 2017, second reading.
Yes, Leader of Majority Party.
Mr. Speaker, for Hansard purposes record, I want to agree with my colleague, Honorable Cecilia Mbarire, that the PP, Public-Private Partnership Bill, the report was just tabled this afternoon, and we really wanted members to acquaint. Secondly, I also need your indulgence on the Coast Guard, because the Security Committee has promised us that they will table the report next week. And as we agreed at the beginning of the tour of Parliament, that we will always begin a second reading when the report of the Committee on Public Participation has been tabled, so that members can go through, and we are not accused of not listening to the public, what they say on various bills. So I really want you to indulge you that we have 30 minutes, but it's good we start.
Okay, that's also granted for the reasons I've said, other than the fact that you've also given good reason, also that we would not have any doubt that really you wouldn't do it unless it's absolutely necessary. Okay, then that marks the end of today's session. And time being 8:33 p.m., this House stands adjourned till Tuesday. Let me repeat for purposes of clarity. I'm sure I said 6:33, but for members who really would have doubt, the time being 6:33. This House, 6:33 p.m., this House stands adjourned till Tuesday, 17th April 2018.